Welcome back to the Outlet Podcast. I'm Gabe.
And I'm Eric. So today is June 19th, and a lot of people recognize today as a day of liberation, because today, on June 19th in 1865, the last slaves in America were freed, and that was because even though the Emancipation Proclamation was proclaimed in January of that year, it took a significant amount of time for Union troops to reach the very far edges of the Confederacy in Texas.
Yeah, slave owners didn't want to give up their slaves after the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah, so it took a pretty long time, considering, what they were doing. But yeah, so a lot of people recognize today as a day of liberation, and today is there's actually going to be a celebration here in San Diego in Balboa Park, in accordance with Juneteenth and the George Floyd protests and the Black Lives Matter movement. It's going to be in Balboa Park, and it's today at 4. You should come.
I'll try and make it. Yeah,
I can.
Especially, it's definitely important during this time.
Yeah,
because George Floyd.
Yeah,
there's been a lot of attention brought to the African American community.
Yeah,
and this is, well, I don't know if you would necessarily call it a celebration, but definitely a day of liberation from slavery in America.
Yeah,
so
and I mean, I think that it's sort of a stunning reminder of how long and how I mean, in a way, it's how far we've gotten. Obviously, the fact that we had slaves in 1865 and we don't now. But on the other hand, it's how little we've actually progressed. I mean, the fact that we've abolished slavery so long ago, yet so many people in this country are still enslaved by the justice system and systems of capitalism and people that control their lives from high up places. And obviously it's not as horrible as chattel slavery, and I'm not trying to demean the pain and suffering that those people went through, but I think that ultimately the fight for liberation is still very much ongoing, not just for Black people here in America, but for all of the working class and all minorities that are oppressed and held down by systems of oppression in this country.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think we might have a little bit of a disagreement about how much we have progressed since then, because I do think that we've made great strides in
and I'm not saying we haven't made great strides, but just because we've gone a long way doesn't mean we don't have a long way to go.
Certainly,
we're still very far from the America that we were promised. The America where everybody's equal and everybody is able to achieve the American dream, and if they work hard, they can live a life of prosperity and happiness.
Yeah,
I think that dream has failed,
Sure.
and Americans all across this country have seen it fail and seen it crumble before their eyes. In 2008, they're seeing it happen again right now, and I think that's a lot of that sentiment is bubbling up, and it hasn't been resolved by our nation's leaders. They haven't addressed it in any sort of way.
Sure.
Those problems persist, and those sentiments remain.
Yeah, I agree. So I'll give you a little story. So yesterday I was playing Monopoly with my sister, and she's 8 years old, and the other one's 12. And we were getting to the end game, where things start to heat up. You're not just buying properties at the beginning. So now I had a set of orange, and I was buying houses, and I had 3 houses on the orange set. My sister went around the board and landed on my property, and she owed me 550 Monopoly bucks or whatever. And she was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to mortgage my properties that I already own to pay you. So that happened, and then she gave me the money, and I said, okay, now watch. Here's an example of capitalism. See those 3 houses I have on? I'm going to take your money to build more houses on it.
Yeah.
And next time you land on it, it's going to pay me more money.
Yeah.
So that was my quick example of capitalism. How does that pertain to what we're talking about now? Well, the American dream of pull yourself by the bootstraps, and if you work hard enough, you'll make it to the top, has, well, to put it bluntly, is just untrue. The actual probability of that happening for a person is very, very low.
Yeah.
I'm not saying people can't work hard and make more money.
Yeah.
I am saying that, for a person in poverty to be the next Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos is very, very unlikely.
Yeah,
They're
and
going to have tons and tons of burdens in their way and hindrances in their way of going up.
yeah, and I would even go as far to say as the hardest working people in this country are probably some of the poorest people in this country. I mean, if you think about who is spending 14 hours a day doing back-breaking labor, I mean, it's not Jeff Bezos, it's not Elon Musk. They're people that we don't know and that we don't know the faces of because they're tucked away at forming the foundation of America, and they're the least credited, the least rewarded, but the most vital and the most necessary. I mean, if you think about who gives this country the most, it's the people that flip burgers and corral carts together in the parking lot and keep our hospitals clean, and the people that drive trucks for 14 hours straight across the country. And people often demean people that do these jobs by saying that they're unskilled and that anybody can do them. And, oh, I could be a janitor if I wanted to, but you can be a doctor if you wanted to. But I think that looking at it from that sort of elitist perspective, that because anybody can do that, then anyone that is doing it shouldn't be valued, really ignores the fact that it is the most necessary part of the work that anybody does in the society, because without janitors keeping a hospital clean, it doesn't matter how well a doctor can diagnose. It doesn't matter how good nurses are at doing blood transfusions, because guess what? The floor is dirty and there's bacteria everywhere. If truck drivers don't drive goods across the country, it doesn't matter what the executives at Vaughn's and Albertsons have a new plan for in their cool new advertising scheme to get people to buy more Diet Dr. Pepper. It doesn't matter what any of those people with the fancy degrees and six-figure salaries are doing or thinking, because without the people that are rewarded the least, they can't do anything.
Sure.
And so I think that's an important way to look at the American economy is not that the people at the top have worked the hardest, and that, look, Jeff Bezos is able to get so much done in just 3 months. He's founded a space company. He's done all this cool stuff. Instead of looking at it from that perspective and saying, wow, Jeff Bezos is such a cool guy. He owns all these cool companies and he does all this cool stuff. He's founded this empire. In reality, it's not Jeff Bezos that's worked for that empire, and it's not Jeff Bezos that's built all those things and engineered those spacecraft and designed that software. It's people that we don't know the names of, and it's people that get paid significantly less than Jeff Bezos that have put in all this time, all this energy into something that Jeff Bezos is given credit for.
Yeah, well, it's really hard to,
and that happens all across the country.
It does. Definitely.
Every single company,
Sure.
Every single enterprise, there's a person at
Yeah.
the top that's getting the credit and reaping the rewards of the people that are not as fortunate as them.
Certainly, yeah.
And the thing is, to get into a position of power like that, oftentimes the determining factors are often unfair, and they're often hereditary, because let me tell you, there's a million people out there that are just as talented and just as hardworking as Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, but their parents weren't able to give them $300,000 or $1 million for their first company.
Yeah, so Teddy Roosevelt had a kind of an idea of what he wanted, and that was a race. And I think I brought this up on a previous podcast, where everyone starts at the start of the race. No one starts a mile ahead. No one starts a mile back. They all start at the beginning of the race. Now, it's up to each person about how fast they run.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a pretty good analogy. But is it achievable? No, I don't think it is. The reason why Elon Musk is Elon Musk is because he made a great investment in, PayPal?
Yeah.
Or something like that. He made a ton of money from PayPal.
Right.
And that ton of money that he made, he's used to make more money. Right. Back onto my example of Monopoly. I took the money of my sister so I could build more houses so I could make more money. And she did eventually land on the property that I did buy hotels on. Yeah. Right. And so that's how Jeff Bezos, well, I don't know about Bezos, but Elon Musk certainly.
No, Jeff Bezos got a significant investment from his parents, who are wealthy financiers in Seattle.
So Jeff Bezos as well. Definitely Elon Musk. His father made his money from blood diamonds in South Africa, I think.
Blood
emeralds.
emeralds.
Yeah. Blood emeralds. So to say that,
but I think that to sort of elaborate on your race analogy from Teddy Roosevelt, and sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
But I think that it's important to realize that sort of a key part about that race idea is not just that it's fair and it's equal and it's just. It's also that the fastest person wins. And in doing so, you have the best person for the job. And I think that that's a very important part of equalizing the playing field, is that we get the best people, the most qualified people, and into positions where they can do the most good. And I think that if you look at, Elon Musk's investments, yes, he's a smart investor. He's clearly a smart person. He would not be where he is without being intelligent.
Sure,
however,
but is he smarter than everyone?
Yeah, and I think that the fact that he was a part of a small group of people worldwide that have the money from their parents to be able to invest in PayPal. Now, among that group of people, was he maybe the smartest, maybe in the top 1%? Maybe. Because he invested in PayPal and the rest of them didn't. But in the world, if everybody was given that opportunity, would Elon Musk be the only person to invest in PayPal? Or, be a part of that small chunk of people to invest in PayPal? I don't think so. Because I think that if we take down these people that are poised to become our next leaders to the level that everyone else is competing on. And I don't mean take them down as in, go burn their house and leave them on the streets,
Sure.
but a little bit more bureaucratically by breaking down legally and logistically and legislatively the leaps and bounds and the advantages that are given to people that inherit a lot of wealth or are born into money.
Yeah, and then in the counter argument I could bring up, the obvious counter argument is that sounds like communism, and communism doesn't work.
Well, I'm not necessarily advocating for everybody gets paid the same wages and everyone has to live in, Stalinkas, and there's just, endless city blocks, all 5 stories high, all exactly the same.
We all have the equal chance
exactly.
to starve.
We all wear gray clothes with a red star at the top of the hat. No.
I know that's not what you're advocating for.
What I'm saying is that we need to, like you were saying, and like Teddy Roosevelt said, have an equal race, because it will be better for all of us, everybody in society, if the people that have the most power are the most competent. And now there's other systems of power that I've talked about extensively, saying that, maybe a competent leader will do bad things because the system of power is set up to make them do bad things. However, just on a baseline, it's better to have smart, competent leaders than dumb, incompetent leaders.
Definitely.
Just as a general rule.
I mean,
and many people are thinking about presidents and dictators right now, thinking about leaders. But I mean every type of leader. I mean doctors, teachers, judges. Every single position of power in society. It's better to have that seat filled by someone that's talented. And by making it so that the race is equal to reach that seat of power, we can ensure that it is in fact the most talented person. Because if it's only 20% of the population that's gunning for a seat of power, then you're only going to get the most talented of that 20%. Mm-hmm. When in reality, you should get the most talented of 100% of the population. Sure. And the ways we can do this, I'm speaking very abstractly, but the ways we can do this is, one, by funding education and making and removing the barriers that prohibit low-income people from getting a good education, right? So providing, removing student debt, providing, free public university education, like many other countries do all across Europe and in many places in Asia. And I think that would be a significant step towards allowing people that would otherwise be restricted, allowing them into positions where they can really benefit the world.
Yeah. So what's tied up in all this that we haven't mentioned yet is the market, right? Because we keep talking about how people should be paid justly for their labor, right? That single mother who has 3 kids and no father figure, who's working 3 jobs, that has to provide money for the rent and food for her children, is working a ton, right? And it's it seems very, very unfair that she has to work 14-hour days to help pay for her rent, while, the Walton family can sit around and make passive income and make who knows how many more times the lady who's working 14-hour days. The problem with that is the market sets the game, and the market sets the price of the labor.
Yeah.
It isn't necessarily some man behind the whole thing with rubbing his hand and scheming and saying, we're going to make sure we pay this single mother who works 14-hour days this amount of money. It's how the market values her position, right? That's why, like I said, like you said, doctors need those people to clean the hospitals. But why don't the people who clean the hospitals make as much as doctors? Well, you could say it's because the doctors went to school for 8 years and they developed a skill that not many people have, and that skill is worthwhile to the market, right? So it's not necessarily that there's some evil genius behind this whole thing. The market functions as the market wants to function, right? And the market pays people according to their labor. So by saying we just need to equalize the pay of all these people is, I know that's not what you're advocating for, but to say to equalize the pay and to try and put everyone at the start of the race is kind of an unachievable idea, because if you do that, then what's going to end up happening is the skilled laborers are going to be making just as much as the people who don't have a skilled skilled job. So, and I don't think that's fair, and the market wouldn't do that.
I'm not advocating for equalizing all wages, so that a biochemical researcher is paid the same amount as a McDonald's cashier. That's not what I'm advocating for.
Sure,
I'm advocating for that McDonald's cashier to have the same opportunities to become a biochemical researcher as someone that was born into a wealthy family. And that's what it's all about. It's not about changing what companies pay people. It's not about changing what people do with their lives. It's about allowing people to do what they do best. And right now we don't do that. There's a significant amount of people that are stuck doing things that are below their skill level and are undervaluing their potential for goodness in society. And by allowing people to have that opportunity to do good in society, you're going to benefit everybody else. And it's about reorganizing and reprioritizing things that we pay for in society. So that means maybe instead of buying one extra, F-16 helicopter or buying, a couple more bombs, maybe instead we put that money towards educating our children and educating college students and making sure that everybody has the opportunity to get that education that they would need to help the world.
Yeah, I'm all for equal opportunity. And equal opportunity is not expedient either. It's a very long-term play, right? What seems expedient to me is the people who say, well, we just need to get rid of the whole damn system because it's all corrupt. And the reason why doctors get paid more than I do is because they had an unfair advantage. When I hear unfair advantage, it's certainly true. There are certainly unfair advantages. But to say that it needs to be that we need to get rid of it somehow by, I don't know, maybe an inheritance tax or, limiting the amount of money that a father can pay his child to get him started. I don't know. It does seem that they unfairly earned all that money.
Yeah, I mean, let's think about it logically, right? I mean, from one perspective, who else deserves that money more, right? If you think about, two parents and their child, and these parents earned a lot of money and they're on their deathbed, who else should get that money other than the child? But I think that it's important to recognize, and I like to go back to your point about the Waltons and the cashier and that single mother in a moment. But I think it's important to recognize who worked for that money.
Well, the father,
right,
who made the money,
right, not the child. Right, and if we say that all wealth should be earned by labor, then that sort of inheritance breaks that rule. And now a lot of people are thinking, well, my parents died with $90,000 in their bank account and a small property in rural Wisconsin. Do I not get that? And the answer is no. You still get that with an estate tax. It's if you inherit more than $10 million, which is a very small chunk of people. If you're inheriting $10 million, congratulations, but nobody, like almost nobody else in the world inherits that kind of money. So the idea of an estate tax is that it reduces the automatic competitive advantage that is given to people that inherit large sums of money. And when I'm saying large sums, I don't mean just 10 million or 20 million. I'm talking billions and billions of dollars, because there are people that have lived in wealth and their family has been in wealth for 10, 20 generations.
Sure.
I mean, if you look at, I read an interesting article about Florence, and Florence was the city where the Renaissance started.
Yeah, that you had the Medici family.
Exactly, the Medici family, and there were several other powerful banking families. And guess what? Out of the 10 richest families during the Renaissance era, 9 of them are still in that 10 richest families in Florence right now. They're still the wealthiest families in Florence.
When did they start banking in northern Italy? Like what, the 1500s or something?
A long time ago, and they're still the wealthiest, right? And that's because the labor market and the capital market are separated, right? And when you inherit capital like that, you don't have to work for it, and then that capital continues to work for you without you doing any work. So that sort of brings us back to the Waltons and the single mother. And like you said, the market decided that the Waltons deserve to get this much money every single month. And even though it seems ridiculous, that's what the market decided. And sorry, the single mother gets this much. And that's what the market decided, so that's the way it has to be. But I think that, once again, it's important to draw that distinction between a capital and a labor market, because the Waltons don't make their money from working. The Waltons don't go out and do consultancy gigs and make millions of dollars every single day. They don't go out and, grind at the office and, go drive for Postmates. They don't do any of that. They sit back and they own. And then that's what makes them that money. And there's that difference between the Waltons and that cashier. Because if the cashier had the same amount of money, irregardless of her skill or her work or what she did, then she would make that same amount of money, because the money works for itself. It doesn't matter who owns the money, what name is attached to it. If that money is invested correctly, and I guarantee you that the Waltons have financial advisors. It's not just the Waltons sitting there and cranking out and finding the stocks and doing research. Sure. I'm sure that a significant amount of that money is managed by people outside of the Walton family.
Yeah. Well,
so what I'm saying is that the Waltons don't earn that money. That money just makes money.
Sure.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't
they don't work.
They don't. And I think that it's important to recognize, that it is important that, interest is given on loans, and that people are rewarded for investing money, right? That is a key component in our economy right now, banks. Right? And there could be alternatives. However, we haven't explored those alternatives up to now, and I won't get into that. But
the Bible says don't take interest on a loan.
The Bible says don't do it, right? I mean, Jesus threw the moneylenders out of the temple, right? But I think that, it's my basic perspective on it is that the Waltons don't earn that money, and that money can be used in a more utilitarian, more altruistic way. And I'm not against saving money and investing money. I think that it's important to continue our engine of growth, and ideally invest in green energy and good, clean carbon reducing systems all across the country. But I think that should be done while not endangering people's lives, right? So that people don't have to live, in asbestos-filled apartments, so that people don't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. People don't have to worry about paying rent, right?
Certainly. Yeah,
the two don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can still have an investment, you can still have investments, you can still have a market, whilst not letting, people go homeless, or not letting children go hungry.
Sure. I mean, if we're talking about utilitarianism, right?
That's what an estate tax is about,
sure.
Right? Is that they didn't earn that money, and that money can be used to either benefit this one person so that they can live in a life of excess and decadence and of carefree, bliss, or we can make sure that 1,000 people, or even 1,000,000 people, if it's a really big estate, tax that's taken, we can make sure that 1,000,000 people have homes, or we can make sure that 100,000 people are able to go to college, or we're able to make sure that all the children in America don't go to bed hungry, right? And I think that I'm sorry, I honestly don't care about the feelings of one billionaire, trust fund kid if it means helping people that are on the are living in poverty and are on the verge of financial collapse.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good point.
I'm sorry, but frankly,
point, yeah.
Fuck them. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, but like,
I don't
just utilitarian calculus wise,
yes,
right?
Sure.
Like the amount of suffering borne by that one person, right? And you can still give them a couple $1 million, and like, come on, you're gonna complain about? Like you can buy a nice house and buy food and essentials for the rest of your life. Again. You're never going to work again, or you can work and just put it in the stock market and make a significant amount of money for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Like, and you will live comfortably and you will never be worried about housing or food.
Sure.
But at the same time, we can make sure that a ton of other people don't have to worry about that too.
Sure. Well, we have to keep this all in mind of the businesses, because the business's only job and its only reason for existence is to make money.
Mm-hmm.
In America, the only reason a business exists is to make money.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds, that's of course obvious, Gabe, but it always has to be reminded. Businesses don't just exist to try and help people. They try and exist to sell things to people and make money from it. So with that in mind, it's no wonder businesses want to keep making more money. Mm-hmm. That's why Amazon, right, is now the global superpower that it is of a business, right? I don't know if global superpower is the right terminology.
I mean, they have like a space program and AI that's better than most countries, know?
Yes. Yeah. They have some insane algorithms that we have no idea what they do. So that keep that in mind. Businesses exist to make money. So it's no wonder that there are businesses that are so good at making money, like Amazon or Walmart. Mm-hmm. Now, pertaining to your whole topic about, I see the Waltons, and they're not laboring like the 14-hour mother, and that's unfair. Mm-hmm. So we should take money from him.
Well, it's not just that it's unfair, because saying that it's unfair sort of implies that it's because one person is making more money than the other, then that's not right, and that everybody should get the same amount of money. It's not that it's unfair; it's that it's immoral.
Sure, yeah.
It's immoral, and it's. Yeah, I'll just leave it at immoral. I mean, that's about it.
Sure. Well, and again, keeping this all in light of utilitarian perspective, certainly. If we just took money from Jeff Bezos, how much good could we do for the population? So much good.
Yeah.
And he's one dude, right? And so it seems like it'd be better if we just, screw Jeff Bezos and just used his money that he made on other things. And I know when I say he made, right? I know you're about to jump the gun on this. It's not necessarily that he made. It's that he had an idea.
And I also want to say, we're not talking about like, hey, let's make a mob and go to Jeff Bezos' house and put a gun to his head and take him to the bank until he pulls out all the cash. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's about having an exponential tax rate so that those that have so much get bumped down to a level where they just have a lot. They just have a lot,
Sure.
And that bumping down of a level, they will certainly complain and they will kick and shout and use all the tools they have in their toolbox to resist it. But I think that at the end of the day, the amount of suffering caused by that sort of action will be inconsequential compared to the amount of suffering that sort of action could relieve.
Sure. And my point in all this is that I am not for equity. I don't believe in equity. I don't think it's the right thing. But I do believe in equal opportunity, right? Which we were talking about at the start of the race. Although I don't think I don't necessarily think it's achievable right now, at least with our current structure in America. Equal opportunity seems pretty far-fetched because there's some people who are starting a step away from the finish line. Mm-hmm. Example, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. Mm-hmm. And they're just set up for exponential success to make so much money. Mm-hmm. But yes, I do believe in equal opportunity. I think it's definitely good, but I don't believe in equity where we just put everyone down on the same level and everyone should be making the same.
So wouldn't let's talk about this from sort of a pragmatic point of view, right? That we got to do this efficiently and in the most effective way. So if I can conjure up a little diagram in our heads, right? So you have a bunch of people that are all grouped up in the same level. Some are farther back, some are, are a little bit farther forward, but it's a big clump of people. And then you have 6 or 7 people that are just a mile out in front, right? And some of them are further. One guy's 2 miles in front, and one girl's only half a mile in front. But they're pretty far out there. Does it make more sense? Because how do we get them all to the same starting line? Because to me, it makes sense to, first of all, bring all the people in that one big clump up to the same level. And that doesn't mean bringing the people at the very head of that clump down. It just means setting a line and then bringing people up to that line. And if some people are a foot or two ahead of that line, leave them be. They're not that much ahead, right? If you're just middle class and, your parents have a college education, they can give you advice on how to get into college, right? We're not going to shut that down, right? That's ridiculous. But what do we do about those people that are so far ahead? Do we just leave them be and say, well, everybody's up to the starting line, but we'll just let them be there? No, if we want to have a really equal starting line, if we don't bring those people back, then they're going to finish in the first 6 places every time, because there's 6 of them and they're way out ahead in front of everybody else. And in order for them to work from the same starting place as everybody else, right? Start at that same starting line, then we need to dismantle the massive advantages that some of these people have when they're born.
But would you call that equity?
I would call that no, I would call it equality.
Equality.
Because you and me didn't get a $1 million check at our 18th birthday, or if we wanted to start a clothing line or sell watches on Instagram, we didn't have our dads come and finance us and give us $100,000. But some people do, right? And I think that it's important to get people to start at the same starting point, because of course you're going to have a successful watch company as an 18-year-old if you get $200,000 invested, right? And of course you're going to be able to be a founding member of this cool new tech startup if you're able to come in with a couple of $1 million in your backpack.
So let me put this in here real quick.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
We keep.
I'm just rambling on and just giving examples of what I'm talking about.
No,
yeah.
But I mean, it's all in the abstract, and so it's kind of hard to follow. Well, no, trust me, I'm following fine, but it's hard to see it, if you will. So the actual number of people who are getting those $10 million checks on their 18th birthday, and the amount of people who are getting all these advantages. Like, for instance, a friend of my dad's that he knows in the business world, when he was growing up, his family moved to Montana, and they took 2 Harvard professors. They went to Harvard and said, hey, how much money are you guys making at Harvard being professors? Mm-hmm. And they said, okay, we're making this amount of money. And he said, I'll double it if you move out here with me and you teach my son. So he, so think talk about an unfair advantage. He got an education from 2 Harvard professors when he was growing up, right?
He was tutored.
Tutors, exactly. Yeah. 2 Harvard professors as tutors. Yeah, he's wicked smart too. But back onto my main point, the amount of people who are actually in those positions is so small compared to the general population.
Yeah,
like I would say it's certainly less than 1% of the American population, right? So when we're talking about, we're talking
about 0.001.
Very, very small.
1,000 families.
Yes, and so. We're not talking about large amounts of people here. So what I'm more concerned about is not necessarily that 0.001. I'm talking about the 99.99999 whatever percent of the people who have a worse education than the people living down the street.
Yeah,
that's what I'm more concerned about. When I think of equal opportunity, I'm not necessarily saying we should take that 0.001% of the population and bring them down to the level that everyone else is at. I'm more concerned about the majority of people. Like for us in Scripps Ranch, for instance, we're a lot more affluent than most neighborhoods, for sure. And the education that we do have at Scripps Ranch is much better than the education throughout most of America.
Yeah.
And so what we should try and talk about more is the fact that, there are certain hindrances in place in poor areas in America, such as bad education, bad communities, systematic poverty that's been in generations. And we should try and level that out first before we start talking about the smallest percent of the population and how we should take them down.
Right, but the
More
two
that we should level the 99%.
Yeah, the two are one and the same. Those two issues are the exact same issue, and I really like your illustration of how that how your dad's friend got tutored by
Harvard professors.
two
yes.
Harvard professors. So let me sort of make a hypothetical based on that. So imagine that this sort of illustrates how the two are connected. Imagine if you had taken, not and I say taken, taxed at a reasonable rate. Clearly that father had more than enough money to spend to be able to pay, the salary of 4 Harvard professors, basically.
It was 2. But
Well, yeah, but he doubled each one, so it's like he was paying 4 Harvard professors a full
sure.
salary.
Sure.
If so, and I'm guessing that money was not like everything. That was not the whole savings account. That was not the whole retirement fund,
Certainly not,
right?
no.
There was
This
still
guy-
still
here's the
money
thing.
in the
Let
bank
me-
after.
let me give you the little more context real
yeah,
quick.
okay.
The guy
okay.
made his money off of a pyramid scheme. So, yeah, like a pyramid
Oh
scheme.
no,
when it was
it's
still
even
legal.
worse. It's even worse.
Yeah. His father.
His father.
Not the son.
Yeah.
The son made his money by. He's also a millionaire
He just
now.
inherited his money from a
No,
pyramid
he actually
scheme.
did not inherit it. He actually started a business off of a very, very small amount of money.
Okay.
That he got from his father. I think it was like a
Right. So
$100,000.
Okay. I got a small loan. Yeah.
of $1 million.
Yeah.
But he took that and he made. He started 3 or 4 companies and he's now very successful
Yeah.
from the money.
Yeah. So imagine if we had taken the salary of those 4 Harvard professors and taxed it. Right? Or we'd taxed that father at the amount, right? We'd taken those 4 salaries, that chunk of money, and we'd given it to schools that are underfunded, right? Schools that are in these communities that you were talking about, schools that have problems with violence and problems with poverty and problems with undereducation and underfunding, and we just give them that money. Imagine how many more students will have access to the opportunities that it would take for them to have the opportunity to start 4 companies and for them to have the education to become a millionaire one day. Imagine how many more people you can lift up and give them the opportunity to be at that level that your father's friend is at. You can benefit so many more people with that amount of money than that one person benefited.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of that's how the two are linked together, is because there is no magical pot of money hidden in Wisconsin. There's no pile of gold in the mountain in the Rockies, right? That money has to come from somewhere. And right now there's a giant hoard of money being sitting on by dragons. Dragons like Jeff Bezos, dragons like the Koch brothers, and dragons like Warren Buffett, that just have these massive piles of gold and will fight anybody that tries to come for it. How else are we going to fund our schools? Sure, we could defund the military. Sure, we could, cut Social Security and cut Medicare and cut all these programs that benefit people's lives. But that's what we're trying to do with this money, is we're trying to benefit people's lives. So how about we take that money that's only benefiting 1,000 families, and we allow them to still live very comfortable lives, but we use that money to lift up the American people that have been pushed down for too long.
Okay, So, the Fed with Jerome Powell as the chairman just printed like $4.3 trillion.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do you think the collective amount? How much money do you think the collective billionaires in America? How much money do you think they have? Over $4.3 trillion?
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah.
I don't know. So
Jeff Bezos himself is just edging on $1 trillion. So if you stack all of them up, if enough of them have 300 billion, which I feel like a good chunk of them do, then
I don't know. So
you'll
what
have-
I was
yeah.
my point in
sorry.
saying that is that isn't that the job of the government to make sure that the education system is running smoothly?
Mm-hmm.
It's not Jeff Bezos' job.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure, he has a moral obligation to use his money in a way that is benefiting the community, I believe, because I'm Catholic and people shouldn't just hoard money. But isn't that the job of the government?
Mm-hmm.
And isn't this whole debate over policy of the government, not over necessarily just billionaires? Because what we're saying, we would like to see these changes in place. We'd like to do that and this, that, and the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
That all comes from legislation and money given by the government.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not necessarily the job of Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. It's the job of the government.
Right. So
that's why we have committees and that use the money that the government gives them in a, I don't know, utilitarian way.
Yeah.
Or alleged utilitarian way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that I'm not saying that Jeff Bezos should personally go and fund a bunch of charter schools and donate money into, Seattle Public School District or whatever. I totally agree with you. That is the government's job, and it's the government's job to find that money to give our kids a future. And right now they're not doing that. Right now they're slashing budgets. They're giving money to charter schools. They're giving money to religious schools, and they're draining the budgets of schools all across this country, of public schools that educate most of our children. And I think that the important question to ask is, why is that happening? Because it's not, I mean, one could take the perspective that, yes, Betsy DeVos, I think that's her name, the Secretary of Education, is just evil. She just sucks. And she comes from an evil family that has, deep ties with evil people, and they're just bad. She's just a bad person, and that's why everything is going bad. But I think that looking at the world through that moral perspective will not allow for long-term systematic change that will ensure that our schools are funded well into the future. So instead of looking at Betsy DeVos as, an evil, horrible person that's doing all this horrible stuff just because she's bad, I think that we need to take a step back and look at why is she doing this? What systems of power are in place that are encouraging her to do this, and how do we combat those systems of power effectively in a way that the next Secretary of Education will be compelled and almost forced to fund education as much as possible. And if that means raising taxes on the wealthy, or if that means cutting the budgets of police departments or the military, then they're going to do that. That's the kind of Secretary of Education that we want. And instead of hoping for a good one, right, and just crossing our fingers and hoping that, Joe Biden or Trump just appoints a nice one, we need to set up systems of power that allow us to exert our voices and allow us to see the changes that we want to see in Washington.
And you would say we don't have that system in place right now?
No, we don't have that system in place, because right now we get the binary choice between Democrat and Republican. And unless there is a difference in the policy between those two parties, then we don't have a say on that matter. So we get to vote on issues like gun control and immigration to some degree, and the social and cultural stance of the presidency and Congress,
foreign policy or whatever.
But we don't get to vote on foreign policy, if you think about that. Because is there any difference in the Democratic and Republican position on Saudi Arabia? Did we see...
Well, not necessarily Saudi Arabia, but I would certainly say on China.
On China, to some degree. I mean, the Democrats aren't a pro-China party. Neither party wants to do any sort of reconciliation. Well, did you see any variance in America's China policy between the Bush and the Obama years? Or between
certainly during the Obama and Trump years.
Well, Trump is Trump, right? And Trump is an anomaly. But was there a difference between, the first Bush years and the Clinton years? Was there a difference between the Clinton years and the second Bush years? Between the Bush years and the Obama years? To me, I didn't see any real variance.
And even the Clinton era, too.
Yeah, and the same can be said for every single country and every single relationship that America has across the globe. They don't change depending on the letter that's next to the president's name.
Yes,
if you look at Kennedy's position, Reagan's position, I mean, they all invaded Vietnam. They all bombed Vietnam. They all toppled governments during the Cold War. They all used the CIA. Even Obama, he dropped 73 bombs every single day of his presidency. That was the average amount of bombs that were dropped on 9 different countries during his presidency. I mean, tell me that's peaceful, and tell me that the American people have any say in foreign policy.
No, they certainly don't.
And the same can be said. And the same can be said for 95% of what the government does. We don't have a say on, where the military budget goes. We don't have a say on, what Health and Human Services does. We don't have a say on what the NSA does. We don't have a say on what the FBI does. We don't have a say on what the cops do. We don't have a say in most of what the government does.
Sure, populism in America doesn't really exist. It's
Not
more
at
of
all.
elitism.
Not at all.
But okay, fair enough. But what were we talking about before?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Of foreign policy. Oh yeah, we were talking about the budget.
The budget.
See,
the budget.
The thing is, we can always find better ways to spend the money that we have in America.
Yeah.
That's a given, and things are going to change all the time, and so we have to be on top of the ball. But we are certainly in agreement about how American citizens don't actually have the right to vote on many of the things that need to get done, right? We don't have the right to vote on, foreign policy, like you said. We don't have the right to vote on gun control necessarily. I mean, we just have to put R or D, and we have to accept all the policies that the one person proposes, even if we don't like one or two.
Yeah,
like that's my whole problem. I do like democratic propositions. I think education should, college should be paid for. I think that's would immediately benefit me as I'm 18. I'm going into college. I do believe in many of the democratic ideas, but my problem is I'm Catholic and I can't vote for them because they're for abortion, and they're not against abortion, right? And it would be going against my conscience if I voted for them, and it'd go against my soul as well. So yeah, and I think in America, well, let me ask you. What systems would we set up in order to get the voice of the American people heard more in America? Because right now it seems, like these distant figures are deciding all our policies in America.
Yeah.
And how do we change from that, these rich billionaires who are getting laws passed on what they want to get laws passed, from the American citizens getting laws passed that they want to see passed?
Yeah, well, I think that it's important to recognize that the system is working for some people, and there's a reason that people are making these decisions. So to say that the American system is broken, and to say that the people in Congress and that are running our government are incompetent, lazy people that just are bad at their jobs, is failing to recognize the fact that no, they're working and they're smart people and they work for somebody, and the things they're doing are working for some people. The problem is that they're just not us, and the group that is benefiting from the policies that are passed by our government is a very small percentage of people.
Yeah,
so
we're
not
talking Exxon Mobil's.
Yeah, Exxon Mobil's and the Waltons. You've heard me list off billionaires before. You know who I'm going to name. And that's the reason I think that so many people are dissatisfied with our government. And so I sort of have two different approaches, two different alternatives that I think could democratize our government. And in order to approach these alternatives, first we need to address what is the problem right now. What is the barrier that prevents the people's voice from being heard? What's the barrier that prevents American legislators from doing what is best for the greatest amount of people? And to me, once again, it's the systems of power, right? It's the fact that a lot of positions in government are influenced and are beholden to groups that are not the constituents, that are not the American people, that are not voters as a whole. And so that's the disparity that I think is responsible for a lot of the strife that we see in American democracy right now. So to give an example of that, right? A lot of military contractors hire high-level military officials when they retire. So they're from looking in from the outside, it seems like that has created a cycle of endorsement between high-level military commanders and contractors like Raytheon, like General Atomics, like Northrop Grumman, right?
Like
Boeing, all of them, and effectively, what ends up happening is that
they're in cahoots with the United States military.
Yeah, exactly. If you as a general choose to buy $1 billion worth of Boeing goods, you can almost guarantee that Boeing is going to give you a nice cushy job after you retire from the military, being a advisor or whatever, or a consultant, because what that does is it doesn't necessarily benefit Boeing that one generation, right? It's not that hiring this old general after he's retired is going to give Boeing great knowledge and great benefit from that general themselves. But what it does do is it shows a precedent that, hey, if you hook us up, we'll hook you up. So that the next generation of generals will see that, hey, if we buy a significant amount of Boeing goods, then we will
get a nice
cushy retirement job, right? Sure. And so what that process has done is, instead of being dedicated to America's national defense and the defense of the American people alone, these generals are also being influenced by these military contractors. So in a way, they're beholden to the American people and national security, but also Boeing and Northrop Grumman and General Atomics and all the other military contractors that have influence, and Halliburton and all those guys, right? And that is happening all across our government. So the FCC is staffed by Verizon executives and AT&T executives, because there's that same cycle of power. The FDA is staffed by Monsanto executives and Tyson Foods executives. That cycle of power is repeated all across the country and all across the government.
Yeah.
And there's one real root of that problem, and that's the political donations given to either of the political parties by these large corporations, by these outside influencers. Because like we've gone over many times before, these donations are not given altruistically. No. They're not given because the CEO of Walmart really just likes Nancy Pelosi and she's just really cool, and she's just dope, and that's why we're going to give her $500,000, right? It's because they will receive a benefit from that donation that is greater monetarily than the donation itself. And so that influence that's being bought comes at the cost of real democracy and those representatives working on behalf of the American people.
It's really an aristocracy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in America, if we want to use our money in the most utilitarian way, most pragmatic way to, try and benefit the most people, then what we have to eliminate first is this donations by large corporations that are influencing the political decisions people make. And Bernie Sanders had a really good point on this too. He said, how many times have we've tried to pass a bill in the government, the American people want something done about a certain topic, and it never gets brought up. But how many times does a billionaire want a certain law passed, and it gets passed, the next day?
Yeah.
And it's been happening for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
I had a teacher one time who told me, if you want to understand politics in America, follow the money. Mm-hmm. That's all you have to do is follow the money. Where's the money going? Where's the money going? In and out through politics. Mm-hmm. That's where the power is. Mm-hmm. And the positions that large corporations have in American politics is much greater than the position of your everyday citizen, right? And if the Constitution is true, then that's unfair. That one person holds more political power than another person, and and I think the reason why it isn't talked about more is because people in America, most people in America, let me qualify it. Most people in America don't actually care about politics.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, they have some idea of how the American system's run, but they just don't care necessarily. That's why, we don't see so many people voting in the primaries.
Yeah.
Although the primaries, you could argue, are maybe just as important as the presidential election, right? And we're certainly feeling that now during quarantine, where, our mayors and our senators are making big decisions and we don't even know who they are.
Yeah.
And, so I share this idea that most people in America just don't care about politics, and they understand that. Well, and people, myself included, I feel like my vote doesn't count, and so why should I care about politics?
Yeah.
I have absolutely no say in it, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and again, tying this back into recent times, the George Floyd protests. What is it all about? It's people who feel they have no power over their communities. That's why they're rioting. It's for George Floyd, but yes, it's also this building anger of, I have no position. and my voice isn't heard. So here's how I'm going to show you my voice is heard by burning down this bank. Yeah. I don't know.
And I mean, that's the first simple step that we need to take as a country is stripping the overinflated amount of power that large corporations and large financiers have over our government.
Yeah, but there was a Supreme Court case. It was Citizens United versus the FEC, and who won that?
Citizens United. But I think that it's important to recognize that the bare minimum of democracy that we do have is not enough, and that only voting for mayors and senators and the president does not equal a democratic and good society, because those vacuums will inevitably be filled, and those with power and those with money and those with influence will find a way to fill those vacuums, no matter how many barriers and no matter how many obstacles we set up to try to stop them. So we need to fill that vacuum of power with our own power and our own objectives and our own goals. And there's two basic ways of doing that. And the first is the sort of uber democratic way, which has a lot of faults to it, which I'll get into. But that is the idea that all these officials should just be publicly elected, right? That means electing the police chief, electing the police commissioner, electing the head of the FEC, electing the head of FDA, right? Just to ensure that all of those government officials are held accountable to the constituents, to the people, which is a very basic way of doing that. And I mean, I'm sure it would
everything
exactly, and I'm sure it would work in a lot of situations. Like I'm sure that Ajit Pai would not have gotten reelected as FCC commissioner after his scandal with the net neutrality scandal.
Yeah.
I'm sure that he would not have won re-election. However, like you said, a lot of people are not interested in politics, and I think that asking all American voters to spend days, maybe hours, maybe even days, reading the profiles of all these candidates for these incredibly nuanced positions in government, at local, state, and federal levels. It's going to get very tiring, and asking people to be able to know the better choice between these nuanced differences in positions between candidates, right? Like if one person, supports more fertilizer and one person, supports fertilizer regulation, most American voters aren't going to know which candidate to support. I mean, I don't even know which one to support, and I came up with the hypothetical. And I think that's one real fault with sort of that Athenian democracy of we're all just going to make these decisions together, and by making these decisions together, we're going to be able to make decisions that are best for all of us.
Yeah.
I think that sort of model can work awesome at a small scale. If you're running a commune, that sort of decision process can be really successful, especially if everybody is really tuned in to the consequences of the decisions being made.
Sure.
If people are deciding, hey, are we going to grow tomatoes or sorghum in this patch of garden, people are directly connected to, do I want to eat tomatoes or sorghum in 2 months? But asking people to be connected into the nuances of bureaucracy in Washington is a bit of a stretch.
Sure.
And so that's why I sort of have this second alternative in my head. And this idea is in many ways rooted in sort of the Chinese system of government. Now, not in power bases or anything like that, or the way it's structured, or the extent of power that the central government has, but more in the way that the government orients itself in terms of goal setting and determines what goals are the most crucial and most essential to meet. And that's done through extensive data collection. So the Chinese government is by far the biggest employer of data collectors and information surveyors in the world. And they quiz people on a range of things, right? Things from national opinion surveys. How pleased are you with China's future? Are you hopeful for China's future? Do you believe that the government is doing a good job domestically? Do you believe the government is doing a good job in foreign policy? And, stretching all the way from those big national ideas all the way to local issues. Like, are you satisfied with the stores in your community? Are you satisfied with the quality of water that comes out of your tap? Are you satisfied with the police service? Are you satisfied with all these things? And in many places, the government actually pays people to take these tests, right? Just a small amount, But just a small reward for their time, right? I mean, it only takes 5 minutes to fill out this quiz. Here's a couple dollars, right? Here's a couple renminbi. And I think that in doing so, the Chinese government is able to interpret and pick up on people's underlying desires, because when you have direct democracy, people often and candidates often tap into people's emotional desires, right? And we saw that happen in 2016. Trump tapped into this vein of anger that was present among much of the American working class, and he wasn't really talking about water quality or how are we going to get those potholes in the road fixed up. He was talking about these broad issues and very hypothetical, abstract things that a lot of Americans tapped into. But the Chinese system really is able to directly interpret and directly and accurately see what the people want materially, right? Are people satisfied with their apartments? Are people satisfied with the selection of food provided by them by the local grocery stores? Are they satisfied with all of these basic things that they need to have a good life? Not just about gun control, not just about foreign policy and all that sort of stuff that American politics is focused on, but just the material reality of people's lives. And so by replicating that sort of system, we can ensure that government officials at local, state, and national levels are held accountable to the direct material needs that they serve. So that means that the people that work at electricity regulators and work at public utilities are held directly responsible to how satisfied people are with their electricity and their water. If people are satisfied, then people stay elected, and this sort of system can be used to directly influence what government does, where they go, and what they do, what they spend their time and energy on. So right now, if there's sort of a power vacuum, right, and the governor of California is not being influenced by anybody, somebody will come in and fill that vacuum of power, provide the governor with some sort of help, some sort of benefit, and in exchange reap some sort of benefit from the governor. So now the governor is working for the benefit of that group. But if instead we can have a set goal for the governor, let's say that homelessness is the biggest problem in California, and a majority of the people in California think that it's that problem. Now all of a sudden we can set that goal for the governor that says in 4 years, we need to see homelessness in California reduced by 50%.
If it isn't,
you're out. Next guy.
Yeah.
And in doing so, we can ensure that our elected representatives are really representing us and our needs and our interests, and not just what we say emotionally and what we tweet on Facebook and sort of the culture clash that we call politics. Instead, we can ensure that our basic needs are being met. Ensuring that, the FDA, instead of working for Monsanto and Tyson Foods, they're working for the American people. And if the American people say that, listen, we don't have enough fresh fruits and vegetables in our grocery stores, then we can set that goal for the FDA to meet that need. And we can make sure that in order to be the next, head of the FDA, you have to get this done.
If it isn't,
next person.
Yeah, well, and you're kind of tapping into the idea that that hierarchies need to be based on competency, which is what seems like the Chinese system, which is if you aren't competent to be in that position, then you're out. And we can quantify that by saying, here are the goals that need to be met, and if they aren't met, then you're out.
And it's not perfect.
Certainly.
Obviously, because there are going to be gaps in people's surveys, and there are going to be questions that go unanswered, and there are going to be gaps in those surveys that don't really address all of people's needs. But we can try to do that. We can try to meet people's needs as good as possible. And this is not a system that can be implemented in a month or 2 months or a year. No, this is something that needs to be worked on.
Sure.
And this is something that needs to be established and experimented upon and tried in different applications, right? We can experiment with trying our own way of paying people for taking these tests, right? And I think that to me, that's a good strategy because it acts as a progressive tax. Because what it does is it incentivizes those who are most disenfranchised to speak the loudest. If somebody is making $5 an hour and you're offering them $3 an hour to take this test, they might be much more willing to spend half an hour every day doing this test. waiting at the bus stop, on the way to work, at home, before bed, as opposed to somebody who is making $100,000 an hour, right? For them, it's much less worthwhile to spend an hour taking these tests as opposed to somebody who's disenfranchised by the system. And that way we can address the needs of the people that need the most.
Yeah.
And
it's a good way to quantify it too. Because you bring up a good point. That the people who, when you're looking at the numbers, let's say, like you said about the FDA, we want more fruits. We want more fresh fruits. Okay. Then you can get that idea of we need more fresh fruits by having these surveys out. But if you just, take the opinion, let's say you just sent surveys to the top 1% of the population who are earning the most, you're going to get a misrepresented, goal, for instance. But
if you flip it and the bottom 20%, the people that are most likely to not have access to these vegetables, to be most likely to not be able to afford these vegetables, if they're the ones that are speaking the loudest, then their needs are going to be addressed much more effectively. So not only are we making sure that those that have too much are stripped of their influence, but we're combating it by making sure that those that don't have enough to survive, that don't have enough to be healthy, that don't have access to the things that people deserve, making sure that they have their needs addressed the same way the wealthy have their needs addressed right now. Making sure that they're the ones that are speaking the loudest, and they're the ones that have their needs addressed, and their needs are the priorities of our representatives. That's how we lift people up, and that's how we ensure that not only do we get people that represent us culturally and socially and agree with our political stances on, the war in Yemen and, the Israeli-Palestine conflict, but also meet our needs, like getting us clean water and making sure that we have public transportation and making sure that we have access to jobs. Because right now, politics is just about all of those, and I hate to use this word, but frivolous things. Things like gun control and things like abortion, which are important topics, but they represent an incredibly small chunk of what the American government does. And by expanding it so that the American government addresses the needs of the people 100% of the time, and 100% of those bureaucrats are working to improve the lives of the people that need help in this country, then we can make sure that we can live in a better country. That's how we fight oppression, and that's how we fight, the powers that be. And that's how we overturn the system that benefits and works for those that already have too much.
Yeah. I'd also like to add that it isn't in the interest of the media to actually do that. Why? Well, because the media is beholden to they have to answer to the advertisers and to the government and
to their owners.
That's right.
Those three factors
that
dominate
media.
the influence.
It's not necessarily that they want to report the news, although that's their job is to report the news. Their job is to make money because they are also a business and to maintain its credibility with the government. So the reason why it isn't in media's best interest is because the people who they are accountable to are the people who would be hurt by this, right? And so, and what do I mean? I mean the Tyson Foods who's in bed with the FDA,
right?
Or any other example. It isn't in the interest of the media to actually present this. So how else is there going to be attention brought to this idea that we should try and send out surveys and figure out what's the best way and most effective method to solve our material problems? And I'd also like to add, too, that when we keep these big ideas, such as gun control and abortion, which are a huge, trust me, abortion and gun control are huge deals and they should be addressed. But there are a lot of other material problems that are, I would say, equally as important, if not more important, than abortion and gun control. But those aren't going to be addressed. Why? Because it's in the interest of the media to keep presenting gun control, abortion, to try and suppress the idea that, there's other issues that need to be addressed too, such as that homeless man who's on the street, who doesn't have a coat for winter, right?
And he's a veteran.
And he's a veteran.
Yeah,
he served in Vietnam.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Yeah, and it isn't in the interest to promote those material problems that we have to deal with every day.
Yeah.
Because that would mean drastic changes in the way our government functions. So, yeah, and you know, you've talked many times, Eric, about systematic problems within our government. You know, the president makes $250,000 a year. How the hell is he not going to, you know, try and make extra money from other places, right? That's kind of an inherent system in our government that's just wrong, is that there are large political donations that are given to these politicians, and these politicians can use, use their political power and their position to help those companies so that they can actually make money. And yeah, that's been in place for a very long time.
Yeah.
You know, you can think about the political machines back during the Gilded Age, right? Or any other part of corruption. You know, Ulysses S. Grant stealing money from the Indian reserves. That were going for blankets to help them. And just taking it.
It's crazy.
It's been, and you know, those blatant examples of corruption are still going on in our politics today, but we just don't see it. Why? Because it's not in the interest of the media to represent, you know, to say, oh, well, there's a massive scandal with Tyson Foods in the FDA, or there's all these, like you mentioned earlier, these generals who are working with Boeing. Yeah. You know, it's not in the interest of it. So if we don't see it, it doesn't exist. If we don't hear it, it doesn't exist. Yeah. But it's going on in the shadows. We know.
Yeah.
We know it's
I mean,
going on in the
the American people are tapped into it. I mean, if you ask Americans, like, is there something, you know, awry with the government? Is there something that's rotten at the core? Most people would say, yeah. You know, most people are aware that something's wrong. The problem is how to diagnose it. You know, you have sort of the reactionary reaction, which is, you know, sort of the Alex Jones strain, right? You know, it's all these globalists, and you know they're turning frogs gay, and you know they do satanic child rituals in the basement of the Capitol, right? You know, all this crazy stuff, which is tapped into the right thing, right? Like there is something wrong at the top. And you know, Congress people are a little bit shady, and they're not these angels that they claim to be in their campaign ads. But the issue is that they're sort of diagnosing it in the wrong way. That instead of saying like let's you know reduce the power of the government and reduce the power that these people have over our lives, they sort of spiral out into conspiracy theories, which sort of discredits the whole argument, you know? So in a way, I feel that, you know, in many ways, I'm sort of allies with Alex Jones and his crew, right? That we're tapped into the same problem, and we have the same enemies. However, our goals and our ways of achieving those goals are so drastically different that we can't help but be at each other's throats, you know. You know, Alex Jones's conspiracy theories are so crazy. Like I just am amazed every time I see that. Like this is a thing that people watch and believe.
I look at it as just entertainment.
Yeah, I mean,
interesting.
Yeah, like to some degree, obviously he is an entertainer. Like obviously, when Alex Jones goes home, he's not yelling about gay frogs all the time. He does play somewhat of a character, but the more shocking thing is that there's a good chunk of people that aren't playing a character, that they genuinely believe every single thing he says, and that yes, there is a satanic conspiracy, that there are lizard people in charge of our government, and that yes, Planned Parenthood is sacrificing fetuses, you know, exactly in the back of every single Planned Parenthood, right? They've got a little pentagram in every single you know basement. I don't know, crazy stuff. But I'll try to segue here, right? Segue out of Alex Jones, right?
Segue from that and not sound conspiratorial.
Exactly. So try to veer away from our own conspiracy corner. I think that I sort of like to talk about how our society answers questions, and this is the sort of thing that happens without us really realizing it. That as you look out across society, the buildings we see, the cars we see driving, the roads we see, the ambulances, the hospitals, everything is our society's way of answering these big looming questions that we're constantly being faced with.
Sure.
And I think that if we look at the way our society is answering a lot of these questions from the perspective of there are right and wrong answers, right? That we're being tested, and it was C instead of D. We can see that we've got the wrong answer to a lot of questions, and the most topical example is police. That right now we've sort of used the police as an answer to many of society's questions, right? Crime is the most obvious one, right? That the solution to police, or the solution to crime, is police, and that we lock up criminals and we throw them in jail and we sentence them to 40 years and that's it. We're done. That's good. Mm-hmm. That's our answer to that question. And I would argue that clearly that's the wrong answer. That clearly crime is very much still a problem. That locking people away for long periods of time and, reducing minimum sentencing requirements isn't solving crime. And clearly we've seen that pattern be established over the course of, our country's entire history. But before we get into that discussion, which is, a lengthy discussion that we could have,
for sure.
I think that it's also important to acknowledge that we use the police as an answer to many other questions. And the police is an even worse answer for those questions. Questions like, how do we solve poverty in our society? How do we deal with mental health? How do we deal with, bad educations, right? Those are all questions that are answered with police in our society. And I think that police have proven to be even more ineffective when it comes to combating those issues. Let's take mental health, for example. Right here in San Diego, there were two young men. One's name was Dennis Castillo and the other's name was Toby Diller, who were both having mental health crises, and their family called the police or called 911 for help, saying that, one was a grandma calling saying, my grandson's having this mental health crisis. He's getting violent. He's throwing things. I need help. I need somebody to come and help me out here. And the other was a very similar situation. And the police came and shot both of them. They killed them. And so that is an example of our society looking at the issue of mental health and looking at that question that we have in society of how we deal with it, and using police as the answer. And clearly police were the wrong answer. They killed these young men that had their whole lives ahead of them. They were innocent and they needed help, and instead our society chose to murder them. So that is a clear example of a question that was answered wrong. And so instead of using police to answer the question of mental health in our country, we need to address it and change our answer. Yeah. Instead of sending police with guns drawn to people's homes who are having mental health crises, instead we need to send people who are trained, send people who know how to help this situation, who know how to de-escalate the situation, and will help this person in their time of need. Yeah. That's how we need to answer that question. And the same can be said for crime, that we've used police as an answer to crime. That when people are stuck in cycles of poverty and cycles of institutionalization, that police are used as an answer to that question. That instead of helping people get out of poverty, helping them get jobs, helping them get a home that they can live in, instead we lock them up. We throw them away. We take homeless people off the street and throw them in a prison cell. And in doing so, instead of helping that problem, instead of addressing that issue, we are only exasperating it. We're only making sure that person only knows a life of crime and a life in a jail cell. Yeah. And clearly it has proven ineffective, by using police as the answer to poverty and to crime. We're only exasperating those issues. And so by really taking a good look at how our society answers those questions, I think that we as a society will see that we have been using the wrong answer, that we've been, we've been diagnosing and treating the symptoms but not the illness, and instead of spending money militarizing our police and buying new police cruisers and building more jail cells to lock people up, we need to take that money and invest it into our communities and invest it into giving people jobs so that we can target the root cause of these issues, making sure that people have the help that they need to have a better life. And that can be done by pulling from the police department's budget. So that's what changing our answer to the question looks like. That's what shifting our priorities looks like, is reallocating the money that we're giving to buy them riot shields, buy them armored cars, give them leftover tanks.
That blows me away that we still did that.
Right. And giving that money to people that really need it. And using that money in a way that can genuinely address these problems and actually help people get out of this rut.
Sure. You brought up a lot of very difficult things to answer. The first thing I'd like to point out is the mental health problem that we have in America. Mm-hmm. And we certainly have a problem. I can't remember what year it was, but we deinstitutionalized mental health.
It was under the Reagan administration.
We basically said to these people who were severely mentally ill that we're not going to keep you cooped up in a mental hospital anymore. Go out and go out into the streets. And I actually have kind of an interesting story about this. So my psychology teacher in Colorado, he was on the highway. So let me give a little context first. He had a student who had schizophrenia. And the thing about schizophrenia is it develops from 18 to 22 usually, but there's early cases too that come out, and this person had schizophrenia as well. And he was driving on the highway, and he's going, just driving, and all of a sudden he looks over and he sees this person. He said running faster than he's ever seen a person run.
On the side of the highway?
On the side of the highway, and it's his student that has schizophrenia. And he was floored by it. And so he tried to get out of the car and talk to her, but she was already gone. And, so just crazy.
Right.
This person running on the highway because they have schizophrenia.
And that's a person that needs help.
Absolutely.
That's not someone that deserves to be locked away. That's not someone that deserves to get charged for public indecency or public disturbance or whatever bullshit charge the cops want to come up with, because that's their solution. No. That's a person that
is mentally ill
and deserves to be helped. Absolutely. That's a person that deserves love and care and kindness from the rest of us. That's not someone that deserves to be shunned away and locked into the corners of society and abandoned. Yeah. No, we have the money, we have the resources. It's just that we're prioritizing the wrong thing. Right. We can help these people.
That's right.
And we all need help. I mean, that's the thing, is that when we're talking about this, we're speaking from a position that we don't need any help, we're all good. But no, you and I both need help, and our society can provide that help. We need an education, you and I. If we don't want to be working at Sprouts and In-N-Out for the rest of our lives and driving for Postmates, then we need help. And we are fortunate enough that our parents can help us to some degree. For sure. But we need help too. We need healthcare too. Like making these changes isn't just going to help people, that are living under highway overpasses and that are, stuck in deep poverty.
They certainly need more help than we do.
They certainly do.
But we also need
help. We all need help. And helping people and making sure that our priority as a society is helping people isn't just going to benefit people that don't have homes and isn't just going to benefit people that have schizophrenia. It's going to benefit all of us.
Yeah. So, but continuing on that mental health point, is the right thing to do to arrest the girl for public indecency by running on the side of the highway? Absolutely not. Look, when you're talking about mental health, you're talking about people who aren't stable, right? I mean, that's kind of what mental health means, people who just don't have a stable brain. And it isn't their fault. Yeah. Right? And by charging a person with a crime, you're saying it's your fault for that. Mm-hmm. Right? It isn't their fault. And so as an answer to a problem such as, public indecency or the answer to the problem being what should we do with people who run on the side of the highway? First off, you have to understand the context. Why is this person running on the side of the highway. It's because they're schizophrenic. Does that mean we should charge them with public indecency? No. We should try and help them. Put them in a system, put them in counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Try and give them, what's it called? Lithium, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lithium?
Yeah.
That helps schizophrenics? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Give them medicine. Help them.
Yeah.
But
and guess what? If they need a house and they can't do it for themselves,
provide it. Look,
and we can pay for it. And that's the crazy thing is people are like, oh, my taxes are gonna double, and how are we just gonna build all these apartments everywhere? Like, it's like, no, we are the wealthiest country in the history of the world.
We just gave $4.3 trillion
to companies.
To companies.
Just giving them checks.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that money should be spent on the American people. That money should be spent improving our lives because we need help.
Yes.
And guess what? We're not going to be quiet and sit down and ask for that help.
But we are going to be quiet and sit down because we don't actually have a political position.
But that's what we're trying to change, Gabe. That's why I want you to come to Balboa Park with me.
Yeah.
I want you to come. It's at 4:00. I want you to show up.
Politics is just tiresome to
it sucks. It sucks. It's horrible. And it's like it's this horrible cycle to get caught in because all you see is just bad. It's just bad. It's all bad. And the more you look at it, the worse it looks. But you just get addicted to it because you just can't look away from the tire fire.
Yeah.
But to sort of continue on that idea of what societies what questions we face as a society and how we answer those questions and how that looks in the real world. I want to sort of something that's very tied into poverty and crime and mental health is drugs and the drug epidemic that has continued and persisted in our country for a long time.
Slimy businessmen, right? The pharmaceutical companies. I can't think of a more evil person.
Oh yeah,
right. Like people who are. I probably can. The more evil person would be like eating an animal that's going extinct. But
yeah,
the pharmaceutical companies in America.
They are like cartoonishly evil. I feel like they are like right out of a comic book of we're gonna sell OxyContin. Like we're gonna pump in 40,000 OxyContin pills to this town in West Virginia and bribe all the doctors.
The price of insulin by 7,000%.
Yeah, it's like, you want an EpiPen? That's $600, baby.
Yeah,
we bought that copyright for a couple million. Now we're making billions.
I was reading a case of this person, Martin Shkreli.
Yeah,
dude, Martin
Shkreli, scumbag.
Scumbag, man.
The worst of the worst.
He is absolutely the worst of the worst. Just this immature, pharmaceutical company CEO who decided that he wanted to raise the price of what drug was it? I forget.
It was the EpiPen.
Was it the EpiPen?
Yeah.
Wanted to raise the EpiPen price, what, like 600% or something?
Insane, yeah.
Like an insane amount. And this is a whole nother topic about what is the position of government in regulating these healthcare, these pharmaceutical companies.
Much more, in my opinion.
Oh yeah,
a lot more. Yeah,
too.
But the craziest thing about Martin Shkreli is he didn't get sent to jail for.
He did get sent to jail.
Well, no, he got sent to jail, but he didn't get sent to jail for screwing diabetics and screwing children with diseases. He got sent to jail for defrauding investors because he overinflated an estimate by $100,000 at a presentation.
Oh my goodness.
That's what he's in jail for. Not for moral crimes, not for being an indecent human by every metric.
Not by being Satan himself.
Exactly. He defrauded investors. He screwed other rich people, and that's what got him in jail. Jeez. But to sort of look back at that question more broadly. In many ways, the police have been used to address the question of drug addiction in this country as well. We jail people for having 2 grams of weed. We send people to jail for having a crack pipe. We imprison all of these people that in many ways are in very much the same position as people with mental health problems. That these are people that need help.
Yeah, well, people who are on meth, they have a mental health problem.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, drug addiction is very much, and it's a disease, so it's also
it's actually a disease,
just a health problem, just straight up. And I think that. Once again, it's another way that our society is answering a question wrong. Listen, locking people up and throwing them in jail for 20 years for having a crack pipe isn't helping them. That's not curing them. That's not getting them sober. Instead, we need to take that money that we spend jailing people and imprisoning people and arming the police and take that money and spend it on rehabilitation programs spend it on public counseling, spend it on resources that would allow people out of the pit known as drug addiction. Like and once again, we can do it. It's not super expensive. We just need to train more social workers, build a couple more public rehab centers, and I think that we can put a significant dent in the mental health and drug crisis that we have in this country.
Yeah, and I think it really spurs from the incentives of the people who are making these decisions, right? Who is incentivizing cops to lock people up?
Yeah.
Right? Who's incentivizing judges to sentence people 20, 30 years? Right? It's the entire system itself.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's all tied to money.
Yeah.
Right? You fill this amount of you fill this quota with as many criminals as we need to fill our jail.
Yeah.
And you get an extra, paycheck.
Exactly. All the
get a
B cops
bonus.
have quotas at the end of the month,
Exactly.
right? Oh, I gotta pull over 4 more people, rake in a couple more $100 for the department.
It's absolutely absurd that that's an incentive.
Yeah. And once again, sort of, I hate to tie it back, but it sort of goes back to, setting goals and, restructuring incentives in a way that the people's demands and the people's needs are prioritized. And we're not going to be able to get these changes in place through voting. It's not going to be a midterm that all the Democratic voters just demand, hey, we want to deal with the drug problem, and all of a sudden all the Congress is just going to pass one nice bill and we're going to have dealt with the opioid epidemic. That's not going to happen. What we need to do is we got to ensure that there is a system in place that makes sure that the priorities of the people that have power over these decisions and have power over this issue are steadfast on meeting the goal of ending the opioid epidemic and making sure that pressure is maintained until the problem is solved. And I think that most Americans, I would say 75%, would totally support having officials prioritize ending the drug epidemic, especially in deep red states. I mean, these are states that vote straight ticket Republican. West Virginia, Indiana, Idaho, Tennessee, Mississippi. All of these states and communities are super hard hit. And I think that if you ask any of them what their position on the matter would be, it doesn't matter if they're a Baptist or a Catholic or what their position on abortion or gun control is. Yeah. They all want to see this problem solved. Yeah. It doesn't matter if they vote Republican or Democrat. We need to see this problem solved. That's a goal that all the American people can be united behind. Yeah, and unless we're able to express that goal, and unless we're able to make sure that change is in place and that our needs and our demands are met, then we're never going to see that happen.
Yeah. So my dad's cousin, they were at a wedding one time for my aunt. She was getting married, and he saw one of his cousins. Well, actually, no, it was a niece. Mm-hmm. And she said, "Oh, hey, how you doing? Good to see you." Right? And she said, "Oh yeah, good to see you too." She gave him a big smile, and she had like 3 teeth. Mm-hmm. Right? She's a meth head, right? And so I don't want that person in my family who's a meth head, of course it's distant at this point, to be locked up for their meth abuse. I want them to get help, right? It's not a matter of, well, they did meth and so they should be punished for their doing meth. That's the wrong way of looking at it. Yeah. That's the way that the American justice system does look at it. Which is, oh, you commit a crime. This is in law, which is, hey, you're doing meth and meth is bad, so we should lock you up. I don't think that's the proper way of looking at it. The proper way of looking at it is there are people who are going to abuse meth, right? That's just a given. So what we should do is, instead of locking the people up and trying to, force our way to making people stop using meth, which is, hey, you see all these people who are in jail for meth abuse? That could be you too if you use meth, so don't use meth. Right? That's the wrong incentive for people to stop using meth. It should be, hey, you see all these recovered meth addicts, see all these recovered people who are now have a family and a job and are stable in our society. See all those previous meth users? Don't you want to be like them? We have a rehabilitation center that you can go to, right? Instead of it being, don't do meth because we'll lock you up. That's the wrong way of trying to get people who are abusing meth.
Yeah, to stop. And meth, I've never done meth, but like all the people that I've heard, that I've talked to that have done meth say it's awesome. It's awesome. Like they're like, yeah, it's awesome. Meth is awesome. Yeah. So to sort of try to say that, the threat of getting thrown in jail will combat meth is
completely wrong.
Yeah, it's
Stupid.
utopian, right? But so you and I disagree or agree that the system is wrong, right? And that it needs to change, right? That clearly what we're doing to combat the drug epidemic is not working.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it
So-
hasn't worked for what, since the war on drugs, well, even before that.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. So I want to bring up a topic that I think will be interesting to talk about, and it's not necessarily something I support, but I think that we should discuss it because I think it does have relevance to this subject, and that's the legalization of drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
We live in California. We've seen that weed has been legalized. There are dispensaries all over the place. You can smoke weed wherever you want, pretty much. You just pull over on the side of the road and smoke a joint, and cops will just drive by and not ticket you, right? It does happen. I'm not saying it
Sure.
doesn't, but people smoke weed all over the place, and it's not a big deal. It's like drinking alcohol,
Yeah.
So it's very destigmatized, but in many parts of the country, most of the country actually, it's still illegal.
Super illegal.
And so let's start with that foundational drug, right? The step one drug to legalize is marijuana, because we've seen it been done all across the country.
Sure.
Plenty of states have done it. Do you think that is something that we should do federally? That legalizing weed is something that because it has a majority support. National polls are like 60% in favor of legalization. So we're over the 50% mark at this point.
Yeah.
So we have public consent. Do you think that that's something that should be done by the federal government?
There's very nuanced.
Yeah.
So morally, no, I don't think so, because I'm Catholic, and smoking weed is wrong because it hinders your ability to think, to make proper decisions. Right. That's really the reason why most drugs are not good in the Catholic mind.
Yeah.
Is, it numbs down your ability to make good decisions.
Could the same not be said for alcohol?
Well, the same can be said for alcohol, which is why drinking in excess is also a sin. But drinking just, to have a drink, is not a sin. Not when you drink in excess, then you're, and trust me, I'm definitely a sinner in this area. But yeah, that's also wrong.
Yeah.
And that's why most drugs are wrong, is because it affects your ability to make good decisions.
Right. I would say that it's a little bit, hypocritical. I think that if there was weed in Palestine during the time of the Bible, then there probably would have been weed in the Bible too. That was just what people like. That was just their drug of choice, and that's the root reason that I feel like there's a disparity there. You know what I mean? Like if instead of turning water into wine, Jesus turned just regular leaves into some nice kush, then that's what would be in the Bible.
That's a pretty far stretch, Eric.
I mean, why is alcohol in the Bible? Like, alcohol is a part of mass. You drink a little bit of wine every time. I mean,
sure.
It's clearly a big chunk of
Catholicism.
Catholicism.
You drink the blood of Christ, Eric.
Oh, right.
The blood of Christ.
The blood of Christ. And the
Just
body.
correction.
It's not crackers. It's the body.
It is.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's
right.
not
That's
get
right.
into that.
That's
Let's not
right.
get into
That's
that.
right. I'm
But,
just saying it's
I-
a little bit hypocritical. But let's
Wait,
let's
let
not
me- don't say it's
let's not
hypocritical
look
and not
at
let me respond.
Okay.
So there's a part in the Bible that says wine has been the downfall of many men.
Ah.
Right? I forget where it is in the Bible, but basically there was a story of where this son drank way too much wine, and he raped his mother. Right? And that's a part in the Bible. I forget where it is. But
Bible's
it's in there.
wild, man. The
And,
Bible's
yeah,
crazy.
And he raped his mother.
This Bible's crazy,
And
yeah.
then it says wine has been the downfall of many men.
Yeah.
So drinking in excess is wrong. Right, but back onto the whole legalization.
Smoking in excess could be is wrong too, right? I mean, just Catholic Church could be like, yeah, have a bowl or two, but don't smoke the whole ounce,
I mean, the
Anyway,
catechism.
never mind. I'm not gonna get the Pope to endorse smoking weed. It's not gonna happen.
But back on, let me
yeah, go
let me
ahead,
give
go
my
ahead, go
perspective
ahead.
on marijuana
Yeah.
legalization.
Because I feel like it's been good for California and Colorado
Yeah.
and
Well,
Washington.
I've
All the
lived in
states have done
both.
it. Yeah.
I've lived in Colorado and California.
Do you think it's had a negative effect on society as a whole?
Dude, so I've probably told you this a few times, but I used to work at Five Guys Burgers and Fries.
Yeah, where everybody
in
would just smoke
Colorado,
all the time.
and everyone was high all the time. Even the managers, even the general manager, when he would come in every once in a while, you could obviously tell he was high.
Yeah.
And I mean, hey,
It's Colorado, baby.
It's Colorado. Like, there's a dispensary on like every corner.
Yeah.
And they have like big signs too. And I think in California you can't really market. Well, no, you can, but
You just can't have weed on the billboard.
yeah,
Yeah.
in Colorado, you can just there's like
Just nice frosty nugs up
Exactly.
on the
Yeah.
side of the highway.
yeah. And there was a store called like the Green Dragon, like around the corner from my house. So yeah, but seriously, everyone was high in Colorado. Look, my whole perspective on the legalization is that we should not be locking people up for 2 grams of weed.
Yeah.
We should not be giving them, a year in jail for having weed. The fact that it's still a Schedule I drug it just floors me.
That's up there with like heroin and cocaine.
Exactly, heroin and cocaine. It's like what the hell, And look, weed is not the weed 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Weed now is like insane. It's so powerful. Right, it gives you like real hallucinations.
Yeah, not that we've ever smoked weed or anything like that.
Never
Oh,
in
definitely
my life.
no.
But I've never done that.
Yeah.
But okay, continuing.
Anyway, so
Well, let me finish. Let me wrap this up.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So the fact that it's still a Schedule I drug floors me. Right.
Yeah.
And look, in a lot of the red states in the South, like if you're caught with weed on you, it's jail for a very long time. And the fact that it isn't across the United States federally legal to smoke weed, I think that's something that should be pushed for, because if California and Colorado, you can go there and smoke weed, why the hell isn't it the exact same for all the states, right? It should be federally legalized.
Yeah.
I mean, Colorado and California, Washington have run the experiment, and the experiment seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah.
It seems to be working fine. And here's another thing, government, that's a lot of money. You think about the taxes that you can have on weed.
Yeah, it pretty much all goes to schools and stuff too.
It goes to schools. It goes to homeless people. It goes to anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a full supporter of it from a utilitarian perspective, but from a Catholic perspective, it's immoral.
From a logical perspective, I'd say.
Yeah, well, logical, sure.
Yeah, but so we can at least say decriminalization.
Yes.
Even from a Catholic perspective, that we shouldn't be locking people up for weed, right?
Yes.
Maybe not do it, but you shouldn't get thrown
You
in
shouldn't
jail
get
for having a
thrown in
gram.
jail,
Yeah.
for sure,
But so that brings us on to the question of the other drugs. Do you think so? Now it gets a little bit trickier, right? That because obviously we can imagine a scale of drugs, right? Stretching from nicotine and caffeine and Advil and stuff all the way to fentanyl, right? And somewhere in there, alcohol and weed are a little bit up the scale from caffeine, right? Obviously we're on
heroin's pretty far away.
Heroin's pretty up that scale, right? Do you think that sliding legalization or maybe just decriminalization up that scale could have positive benefits? Because once again, I think that we've seen that over-policing and over-criminalizing these drugs has not led to a significant reduction in their use or their distribution.
It's been severely ineffective.
Right. People are still doing heroin despite people being locked up for 40, 50 years
Because
for heroin.
is so good.
Yeah. We endorse heroin.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People do think it's amazing.
Exactly.
So
do you think, because before we get into a hypothetical discussion of how it would work in America, let's look at what other countries have done. Portugal, for example.
Or Amsterdam.
Yeah. Portugal has decriminalized all drugs. So that means if you're caught with distribution amounts, right? If you have a backpack full of heroin, you're probably going to go to jail, right? Because you're probably not going to go do a backpack full of heroin right now. You're probably going to go sell it. But if you're caught with a little baggie of heroin, you're probably just going to go shoot heroin. And so the cops have no right to arrest you in that case. So and in Portugal, it's been pretty successful. The amount of people in jail for drugs has dropped significantly by almost 50%, right? And the number of people that are addicted to drugs has also dropped by a significant amount. Yeah, almost 25% by official numbers, because instead of sending people to prison for having low amounts of drugs, they get encouraged by the court to go to a rehab facility. So not you get locked away inside a rehab facility, but you given a court date and you're pressured by the court to go to a rehab facility that's provided for you by the state.
Sure.
And that has led to a significant decrease in drug addiction in Portugal, because instead of punishing people for what is essentially a disease, they're providing them the help that they need to combat that disease and hopefully be cured of it. Now, this has also, decriminalization has been experimented with here in America as well. For example, Fresno has decriminalized meth use. So people
They're like the meth epicenter.
It's the meth capital of California, if not America. That's not a great town, I gotta say.
No, it is not. But yeah, there's a ton of meth users.
And in a way,
did you see the Vice documentary?
I did. In a way, it's been largely ineffective because meth remains a huge problem in Fresno. Distribution is able to continue to flow, and it sort of acts as an artery for meth distribution through the Central Valley and up into northern America. But I think that a lot of the reason we're seeing that program in Fresno isn't as successful as the program in Portugal is because they have done half of the program. They've decriminalized it without providing the resources that people need in order to have an alternative to using meth and to being homeless and to all these problems that people face in Fresno. And in many ways, it's probably because Fresno is a relatively poor city in the middle of Central California with not a lot of money and not a lot of resources to build mental health facilities, to build drug rehab centers. But I think that if we implement this sort of program at a broader level, at a state or national level, we will have the resources necessary to experiment with this program in its full capacity, so that we can see the full potential of this sort of program. But so that's just talking decriminalization. Sure. So now we sort of move on to the next step, right? The next more radical step, which is just full-on legalization of certain drugs that are right now illegal. And we'll start the conversation with the lowest level of drugs, up from weed and alcohol, which in my opinion is psychedelics. Drugs like shrooms, psilocybin, LSD, and peyote, those sorts of drugs, which do not have long-term physical they don't damage people in the long term.
They do damage people.
I mean, yeah, if you do acid every day for months, you're probably gonna go schizophrenic. Yeah, but if people do psilocybin once a month for a couple of years, they're gonna be totally fine. This has been proven time and time again that psychedelics are not physically dangerous. Now, can people have psychotic breaks? Can people have bad trips? Absolutely, but I think that in terms of physical danger that these drugs pose to the general populace, I think they rank right up there with alcohol and weed, and in many ways alcohol is even more dangerous than some of these psychedelics like acid.
More people die from alcohol than they do weed.
No one dies from weed and no one dies from acid, right? Sure. I mean, you could say, yes, this person got hit by a car when they were tripping, but it's not that they overdosed on LSD and died.
I mean, people overdose on alcohol though.
Oh, all the time, and they die. So I think that legalizing those would be a reasonable step to take and not too radical. And there are some U.S. cities that are looking into policies like that. For example, Denver, on this ballot in November, there is a petition to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms in Denver. So not legalizing them, but decriminalizing them. So a step in that direction. Sure. Now, I also feel, not just that these drugs are relatively safe and it's okay for people to do. Now, I'm not endorsing, if you're 14, don't go out and do acid, right? Like, wait till you're well into adulthood before you experiment with psychedelics. It's very, emotionally taxing and can be incredibly tough to do. But I think that without just looking at the safety issues and the potential danger of these drugs, I also think it's important to look at who's going to be using these drugs, and is there really going to be a dramatic increase in the use of these drugs if they're legalized? I think that right now, pretty much anyone that's going to do acid right now is going to do acid when it's legalized, and there's not going to be a significant chunk of people that would do acid if it was legal. Now, there might be some obviously.
Yeah, because that's kind of the fear with all this.
Right, is that everyone's going to be tripping, right?
Everyone's going to be doing heroin.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's sort of a misconception because I mean, try to imagine that sort of person and really try to think hard of whether that person represents a significant chunk of America's population, right? The person that would gladly do LSD if it was legal, right? That is happy to do acid, but it's illegal right now.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's not a large percent.
Right? People either are gonna do acid or they're not, in my opinion,
sure.
right? And sure, there might be some people that are they're 19 and they want to do acid, but they don't have a good acid drug dealer. Then they might be in that category of, if I can go down to the acid wholesaler down at the end in the suburbs, I can go do acid. But I think that generally people that are going to do acid are going to do acid, and by making sure that they're able to get it from a safe, regulated source, we can avoid a lot of the danger that comes with buying psychedelics,
Sure,
especially acid, because it is an undetectable drug. You just put a gel tab or a paper tab on your tongue, and you have no idea what's in it. People can
Lace with PCP,
place it with PCP, 1P-LSD. There is a long list of drugs that people can swap out for LSD and peddle it off to unknowing customers, and those drugs can have dangerous side effects that people are unaware of. So you can avoid that danger by legalizing it and selling it, right? So instead of in addition to having weed dispensaries all over the place, you might have psychedelic dispensaries where you can go there and you can buy psychedelic truffles and mushrooms and tabs and peyote, like you do in Amsterdam right now. You can buy psychedelic truffles in Amsterdam right now, and they don't have a psychedelic epidemic. It's not something that all Amsterdammers are doing.
There's a bunch of people
just tripping all the time. Although I feel like that'd be an awesome place to be. It's not an issue. It hasn't affected the productivity of the city as a whole. And overall,
part two of it is, what's the productivity going to look like? Is there just going to be a bunch of high people at home?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's not gonna be bad, and in many ways, it might even be good. I mean, what you're seeing right now is all across America, people experimenting with psychedelics once more. You're seeing sort of a psychedelic renaissance, especially amongst tech startups, where these Stanford graduates will microdose on 10 milligrams a day of acid, and that will just give them a little bit of a creative kick that they need to take it into overdrive. So sure, I definitely see the potential danger, right? That people that are already susceptible to schizophrenia and other mental disorders might get sent over the edge if they're doing legal LSD all the time or legal shrooms all the time. But I think that generally the overall benefit to society will be greater than the overall negative parts of that sort of policy.
Yeah. And I think we both agree that there are real mental health problems that are attributed to drugs. Right? There are some people who, will do acid every day for a month, and then they're just fried. They're brain dead from there. They become vegetables. Like, their mental health is destroyed. Right? And,
well, it's not that they're vegetables; it's that they're so spaced out that it's hard to be tethered down to the real world. I feel like the people that are brain dead are like the people that do too much Xanax. Like, that's you see a lot of those. Like and here in San Diego, like, just people that just will do 4 bars a day, and they're so let's go better. Like, and that's all they say all the time. They're just hopping from garage to garage and just being barred out all over the place. It's really sad.
That is super sad. But continuing with the whole decriminalization idea of all drugs should be decriminalized.
But before we continue, so psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin, peyote, legalized, decriminalized. What's your position? Nationally, federally, statewise?
There's a lot of variance between psychedelics.
Oh yeah,
there's a massive difference between shrooms and LSD,
and DMT.
Absolutely. There's huge
salvia,
variance. Huge variance. So, first off, there needs to be a ton of research, not done by me, because I have no idea about most of psychedelics. They're still very foreign to me. There needs to be a ton of research done on what are the medical impacts on people's lives. Can it be abused, right? Because when we're talking about alcohol, right, or weed, that's something you can do every day, right? You can smoke weed every day.
You shouldn't.
You shouldn't. There are people who do it, and are straight edge, very, very smart as a whip, who can drink every day, who can smoke every day. But people who can stay sharp doing acid every day or doing shrooms every day.
Well, that's the thing is, like, it's not that kind of drug. You know what I mean? And now I'm, slipping away from the, logical
part
we're going to
of it,
talk
yeah.
about utilitarian, what's best for a good society. Now it's just like, the people that I know and how they use psychedelics. It's not a everyday thing, and it's not really a party drug. It's the kind of thing you do once every 2 months, every
Sure.
6 months even.
Or at least that's how it should be, right? But there's still going to be people who...
Yeah, there are going to be people, but there's a hell of a lot more people that I know that smoke way too much weed and drink way too much alcohol. That's for sure, and they have access to all those drugs. So I think that the potential for abuse is much higher among the drugs that are legal right now that people have access to than psychedelics.
I mean, but you can't really quantify it. I mean,
I totally like look at how many people do you know that drink too much? How many people do you know that smoke too much weed? How many people do you know that do too much acid?
I know a few people who do too much acid.
Right, but and then compare that to the people that drink too much and the people that smoke too much.
But that's not a good enough indicator because more people have access to alcohol and
And
weed.
I would say all the people that have access to weed probably have access to LSD as well. Just because
fair
you're buying drugs anyway, like
Yeah.
they're all the same drug dealers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough. But again, I do. So yeah, I'll give you a little. I don't want to give that story. I'll hold that story off.
It's okay. It's okay.
But again, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
People can drink every day and still function okay. Right?
They can't though. Like it's
Well, but let me-
you're an alcoholic. Like at that
Let me
point.
qualify. Right? There are people who can smoke every day and still function.
Yeah.
Can you agree with that?
Yeah, and it's not good, but we still give them that freedom to do what they want with their body, you know.
Look, when we're talking about decriminalization of
Like why before we get into I know I'm taking a step back here, but why do we allow that to happen? We know that it's detrimental. We know that it's bad for people to drink alcohol. We know that it's bad for their brains. It's bad for their bodies. It's bad, but why do we allow it?
because it makes money. Yeah.
It makes money, right? But also,
There's a lot of reasons.
we believe that people have the freedom to do what they want with their bodies, and if they want to do this thing that's bad for them, it makes them happy. All right, we'll let you have a drink out on the town. We all know it's bad for us. Anyone that drinks, I mean, maybe if you've had your head under a rock and you've been spoon-fed lies your whole life, but I would say 99% of the people that drink know that it's bad for them. 99% of the people that smoke cigarettes know that it's bad for them.
Well,
Yet we still allow that to happen.
Would you say having a glass of wine at dinner with your spaghetti and meatballs and your garlic bread
Yeah.
and your nice cream spinach or something? Would you say having a glass of wine at dinner like that is a bad thing?
Well, I would say that right now you've drawn an example of someone that knows moderation, knows how much to take, how much drugs to do, how much drugs is bad for them. So if someone's able to just have a wine with dinner every 3-4 days, that's an example of a person that, yes, it is detrimental to their body. Even though we know plenty of people that have done that their whole lives and they've lived well into their 80s and 90s, right? But can we agree that just on base level, it's bad, right?
Well, I don't know how bad it is.
Zero alcohol is better than some alcohol because it's poison. It's bad for your body and it kills your cells. That's what it is. That's what being drunk is that your body is decomposing this poison and it's drawing energy from your brain, right? Not going to get into the science and nuance behind alcohol, right? But what I'm saying is that it is bad for you, yet we recognize that it has a potential for abuse, alcohol and all these other drugs that are illegal, yet we recognize that people should have the freedom to enjoy these things in moderation, right? But we can allow the same thing with psychedelics, right? Now, are there going to be people that trip every single day for months? Sure, right? There's always going to be people that aren't able to do this sort of thing in moderation. Yet we allow the possibility is also there for the drugs that are legal right now. It's the same sort of situation, in my opinion, and in many ways it's less. The potential dangers and the potential risks and the potential for abuse is actually lower with psychedelics.
Yeah, well, do you
see what I'm saying? That it's a very
yes.
similar situation. That there's a potential for abuse in both categories,
in both sectors,
right?
for sure.
And yet we allow people to enjoy them in moderation because we respect their freedom to choose. And we respect that, listen, if you want to do this thing, there's a potential for risk, there's a potential for danger, but it's your body, you do what you want.
That's why all the alcohol companies, when they advertise, are obligated to say, drink responsibly.
Drink responsibly, right? Maybe the same thing to do with tabs, right? Maybe you're not allowed to buy. Maybe you're not allowed to buy 1,000 milligrams every week. Maybe you're only ration to 100 milligrams a week. I don't know how you would set that up, but I think that you would be able to set up a system where people are allowed to enjoy this freedom. It doesn't hinder their lives, and they're allowed to enjoy it in moderation. Yet we're still able to provide the relief for people that aren't able to control themselves, that aren't able to do this sort of drug in moderation, and provide them with the help that they need to get out of a hole that they need to get out of. So I really do think that the legalization of psychedelics would be beneficial for society, and certainly beneficial for people that do psychedelics right now in unsafe conditions, buying from street dealers that could potentially have swapped those drugs for something else.
Yeah, and if you couldn't tell already, I'm very uneducated in the whole topic. Mm-hmm. So this is just straight off the dome. But to me, it really does seem that locking people up for having a tab of acid, or locking people up for heroin, for that matter, or locking people up for cocaine, right? Mm-hmm. Even, of course, if they're dealing it, then it's a little bit more understandable. But if it's a person who's just using it, I don't think locking up is the best solution.
Yeah, and we've seen it fail.
Yeah,
it's not working. It's not solving the problem. We need to change our tact.
What we should do instead is try and set up ways to help the people who are, like we've mentioned earlier, it's an actual disease. It really hurts people. Families are destroyed by drugs. And so, try and get these people help. I don't know. The whole decriminalizing drugs, there's a part of me that thinks, well, if we do that, then there's going to be a lot more people who are willing to do the drugs that are decriminalized.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily willing, because I think that the conditions that would set someone up for a willingness to do drugs, especially hard drugs, are there or not, regardless of the legality. If someone has the preset of conditions required to be willing to do heroin, right, which are probably pretty bad, if your life's not looking great, you don't have a great job, and you don't have a good future, that might be the recipe for you to try heroin. Now, everyone's recipe might be a little bit different. Some people might just try it on a whim and just do it once and have real fun and never do it again. But there's a lot of people that the requirements for them to be able to do these hard drugs like meth or heroin or opiates or whatever are already in place. And so instead of locking them away for having those conditions, we need to address those underlying conditions. And
can I bring up a principle here?
Let me wrap it up real quick. Just 1 minute, right? That by legalizing, you're not changing any of those underlying conditions. There's not going to be anybody that flips over into the camp of I'm willing to try heroin or I'm willing to try LSD because of legalization. Right? That's not going to be a big influencing factor. What is going to be a big influencing factor is the material conditions of someone's life. Yeah. If they're happy with their life, are they satisfied with their future? Do they feel like staying sober is worthwhile? And if they're not, it doesn't matter what the laws say. I'm going to do heroin. And changing those laws isn't changing those underlying conditions. So I feel like the changing of those laws isn't going to lead to everybody going out and doing these drugs. It's going to lead to the same people that are using them now continuing to use them.
Yeah, it's what we're doing by by making people who have a gram of meth criminals is we're pulling at the leaves of a weed, right? If you want to kill the weed, you have to pull it from the roots. And so the roots of the drug epidemic in America is, we could say, poverty, right? It isn't necessarily the drugs themselves. It's the reasons and the incentives why people are drawn to try these drugs, right? And that's poverty. Mm-hmm. So if you want to, let me start with a principle here.
Yeah.
Would you say it's better to do no drugs during lifetime than doing drugs?
Ooh, are you asking me personally or like theoretically?
Just theoretically.
Yeah, don't do drugs. Kids.
Don't do drugs, right? There's the drugs.
I don't know
such
though.
As heroin.
I would say I know a lot of people that have had their lives significantly improved through the use of drugs.
Oh yeah, well I mean, yeah, we talk medicine as a drug.
Illegal drugs as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. But just a very basic.
They can be good, and to provide some scientific, not really scientific, this, an article headline that I read at some point, that researchers in Canada and the UK are doing extensive research on the benefits of MDMA and psilocybin for treating depression and PTSD, and they've had really good results so far. So I think that these drugs that we've up until now sectioned off and cordoned off as you can't touch those for any sort of good, are going to be revitalized and see broader use as medicine. Okay. And I think that especially psilocybin can be used as an extremely powerful antidote to trauma and to depression and to anxiety, especially pre-death anxiety. I mean, you hear countless stories of people that are on their deathbeds being anxious and distraught at the feeling of death approaching, and them doing psilocybin mushrooms and having that weight lifted off their chest and coming to peace with the fact that their life is ending. So I think that broadening our perspective and looking at these things that we've traditionally looked at as illegal drugs and things teenagers do in their cars, by changing our perspective on those drugs, we can really benefit a lot of people that we're not helping right now. Pumping people on their deathbeds full of drugs made by Pfizer and any other pharmaceutical company isn't working right now. And once again, we got to look at alternatives. And right now, these drugs are looking like a really effective alternative to what we're doing right now.
But again, back to the first principle.
Sorry, I went off on a little tangent there. I just wanted to make sure to throw that in, right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I've heard about the psilocybin use on PTSD, and it's been super effective from what I can understand. Mm-hmm. But just as a beginning principle, a person who doesn't have any pre-existing health conditions and doesn't need an illegal drug to help them, is it better to not use drugs for a life? I'm talking meth.
Sure, I'll just agree with you, just so you can have your.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean,
have your segue.
Thank you.
I don't want to be a brick wall here, stop you from.
Sure, from going.
Yes, no drugs is better than drugs.
Yes, no drugs is better than drugs. If that's the case, then how do we eliminate the people who do use drugs? We have to.
We're not going to eliminate them.
Oh,
let's help people not use drugs.
I misspoke. Yeah. I misspoke. I meant to say, how do we
get them out of here?
I meant to say eliminate the incentive.
Yeah. Okay. No, I understand. We're not going to
eliminate them.
Get them out of here. Yeah, go do full Duterte on them. Yeah.
What I meant to say is, yes, eliminate the incentives for these people to use drugs. Mm-hmm. The best way to do that, like you mentioned earlier, is by changing the reasons why these people are going to drugs. Mm-hmm. Right? The reason why drugs are used is because it's an escape from reality. Mm-hmm. Right? That's a pretty basic premise as well. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about ibuprofen. I'm talking heroin, cocaine. They're an escape from reality, and people want that escape because it feels good. Mm-hmm. All the people that I've talked to who have done cocaine or hard Schedule I drugs, I say, what is it like? And they always say, it's the best feeling in the world. You feel like you're on top of the world. Mm-hmm. And that's a dangerous feeling because it's not true. Mm-hmm. And it's very disconnected from reality.
Well, you certainly feel it. I'm in the moment, right? I mean, obviously, in reality, you're not the king of the world, right? You're just walking down the sidewalk, but those feelings are very real, and that endorphin rush is very real. So it's not that it isn't happening. Yeah, it is. It's just in your own head, right?
It's not that it's fake, but it's untrue.
Mm. Once again, I have an issue with that because certainly that person is feeling that, and that's true. It's just that what you're seeing is a person self-diagnosing and self-medicating, right? And they're sort of treating their disease, their reality with their own solutions, right? And instead of finding real help and effective help, they're going with what they have access to. They can't afford a therapist, they can't afford antidepressant drugs, but I can afford a little 10-sack of crack every once in a while, and that allows me to diagnose or treat my depression and my anxiety and my general dissatisfaction with my life.
Yeah.
So I think that.
But
yeah, go. Sorry,
But
I
think
I'm going on a tangent again.
No, but
I've had too much coffee.
Yeah, me too. I'm on my second cup.
Second cup.
But again, let me point out a problem with that argument is that they're not actually treating their depression. What they're doing is they're treating their obsession for more meth. So I think yeah, like they're one and the same, right? Like the reason you want more drugs is because being sober sucks. Like that's the root reason why. And I mean, obviously, you do get caught in the cycle of physical addiction, right? After doing heroin for a couple of years, you're physically addicted to heroin. Not a couple of years.
Well, a couple, I don't know, months, weeks, whatever. But I think that it's once again important to address the underlying reasons why someone would do it in the first place, right?
Which is poverty, right?
Yeah, and dissatisfaction,
or
just in general.
Uneducated too.
Well, I mean, I think that most people are educated with the risks. It's just that reality is so shit that like, yeah, I'll lose a couple of teeth if it means not having to deal with this bullshit right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that. I don't know what I think. Keep going. sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So, again, with the whole decriminalizing it, I would want to see good evidence. I would like to see good evidence that it's actually effective. And if it is effective in reducing the amount of people who are addicted to drugs, then it should be implemented. Yeah. I mean, so like with your Portugal example, they've seen a 25% decrease in drug users, right?
Yeah. I mean, don't quote me on that. I read the article a while ago, but it was a significant amount. It wasn't just 1 or 2%. It was,
okay,
double
if
digits.
If we're really going to attack a large part of the problem, then we have to attack the pharmaceutical companies because they're the ones that created the drug epidemic in America.
Yeah.
So back, so McKesson was an opioid supplier in America. I don't know if they still are. I think they are. They're still operating. There was many cases where a small town in, I don't know, Ohio would be receiving a large amount of opioid pills because they incentivized doctors to prescribe these opioid pills. And they would be giving, I don't know, 50,000 pills to a town of 10,000 people, like 5 pills per person in the town. It's incredible.
It's a recipe for disaster. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's really slimy what they've been doing because, of course, they're a business, profit first. And the best way to make money is by getting people addicted to these opioid pills. And that's been done through incentivizing doctors to prescribe them.
Yeah.
Oh, you got a little bit of back pain?
Yeah.
Here's
some Oxycontin.
Take some Oxycontin. Take here. I'll give you, I don't know, 5 pill bottles full of Oxycontin.
Yeah.
And after the prescriptions run out, what do?
Yeah, and
turn to heroin.
And your money runs out too. Buying Oxycontin is expensive.
Yeah, very expensive.
Yeah, I don't know. So what do you think just generally about legalizing it as an alternative? I mean, I think that generally like the important concept to remember when venturing into areas of new policy and experimenting with policy, it's important to have variety, right? That this sort of policy is implemented to various degrees across a variety of different areas in order to see how effective it is. Maybe it's more effective in rural areas, maybe it's more effective in urban areas, maybe it's effective among certain communities and not others. But that's why it's important to implement a variety of programs that are all based on the same core idea of finding a different way to address drug addiction and poverty and crime, but choosing different ways to implement it. And once again, that's sort of, I know I always bring it back to China, but that is sort of the way that the Chinese government has been able to establish such reliable precedents for how to achieve certain goals. And that's through the use of broad goal setting, but allowing autonomous decision making in order to reach those goals. So if let's say, for example, in a hypothetical, we set the one goal for all mayors in this country is to reduce drug use, right? And my guess would be that all of those mayors would implement different policies. Some might do nothing. Some might do a lot. Some might, go in this one direction. Some might, reduce police budgets. Others might, invest in education. They're going to do a variety of different things. And by experimenting, across a variety of areas, using a variety of different tactics, we can see the results in real time. We can see what is the most effective tactic, where are these tactics most effective, and once those precedents are established, then they can be rolled out nationally. Once we establish that, hey, this policy works 100% of the time, and it has worked incredibly well in these 3 major cities. Now that policy, once it's been established, can be implemented in all the major cities across America because we've seen it work. And unless we start that process of experimentation and that process of goal setting, we're never going to get there. Because it needs to be a constant process of improvement and of making sure that our representatives are working in the most efficient and effective way. And once again, this can sort of be done under the umbrella of a goal-setting institution, an institution that prioritizes the goals and the energy of government officials in order to ensure that their energy is being used in the most effective way, in the most utilitarian way.
Well, and it's seen great success in China.
It's seen great success in China. I mean,
so we should implement it.
Yeah, and
of course, China and America are different.
Yeah, and it's to me, it's a great system for coming up with really boring technocratic improvements, because that's what, in my opinion, makes politics and governments work effectively. It's not the big showy headlines. It's not the big flashy articles that you see at the front page, the big bills being passed. It's the little mechanisms. It's the little gears that are turning. It's the small sums of money that are being spent in one place instead of another that really shape how a government works and who it works for. So by making sure that there is a group of people that are dedicated to ensuring that all of those little things that we don't pay attention to, that we don't have the energy and the knowledge to pay attention to, making sure that all of those little metrics are correct and and all that energy is being used in exactly the right way, we can ensure that at every level of government, no matter how big or how small, how important, how not, we are being served and we are having our needs met.
Yeah, I feel like people just don't have enough time to really sit down and go through all the things that need to be changed and what's the best and most effective way to do it.
And that's why we need to we need to make sure that role is specialized, that there is a group of people whose jobs it is to make sure that people's needs and wants are translated into specific quantifiable goals for policymakers. That middleman does not exist right now, and we need to create that as a society if we want our desires to be expressed and our needs to be met in policy at every level of government.
Yeah,
we're kind of talking in circles at this point, but
it's important.
It's super important, and I think that road is something that we have not really traveled down as a country, and I think that setting up those systems of power is the most crucial step in ensuring continuous progress, because if you fight really hard for one conviction, or if you fight really hard for one bill to be passed, the systems of power that prevented that bill or prevented that conviction still remain in place. And even if you throw all your effort and the American populace stands up to get Derek Chauvin convicted for life, right, or gets the government to ban chokeholds and knees on necks nationally, even though we will have won that one victory, and it will have been an important victory, the system and power that prevented that victory in the past will still be in place and will continue to prevent further victories. So instead of focusing our energy on small legislative achievements and small victories over the system in place, we need to keep our goal and keep our eyes focused on large systematic change that will ensure that we don't have to fight for change in the future, that the system will work on its own, that we don't have to continue to go out into the streets and demand what we want, that we can simply sit back and enjoy our lives without having to worry about the corruption in our capital, without having to worry about our city council selling us out to some business, without having to worry about us getting brutalized by our police in our own communities. I think that should be the ultimate goal of progressives in this country, is to establish a system so robust and so effective that the most cruel, evil, vile, greedy people can be put into positions of power, yet they will be incentivized in such a way that in order for them to benefit, they will have to act in the best interest of the people as a whole. That is the ultimate goal.
Sure.
Is if you can get the most rotten, evil, corrupt motherfucker in there, and yet they still do good things because that's what's best for them, and that's what it takes to maintain that position of power. That is an ideal system. Because you can't just sit around and hope for angels to
occupy the positions.
And
It's
these altruistic politicians. Because if you have a system that lets the other guys get that position of power and it actually encourages vile, greedy, corrupt people to take that position of power, you're never going to get the change you want to see.
Yeah. I mean, you can't just sit around and wait for angels to pop into politics.
No, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, because the incentives currently, the incentives for politicians is all skewed. It's not for the American people. It's definitely not. It's in their own money interest and for their own party interest. And that's a huge disconnect because our politicians are supposed to represent the people. They're the representatives of the people, but they're actually not. They're only representing their interests.
Definitely.
And and I think that's a very good place to start the change in American politics, is change the incentives of our politicians. Change their incentives away from helping Tyson Foods, helping the Walton family, helping Jeff Bezos in any way. Change it away from those small few towards the great many of the American citizens.
Yeah, and what's important to recognize about that is that in doing so, you're going to make sure that those people are doing their jobs in the most utilitarian way.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that's something that we've harped on again and again, but that's the only way we're going to get the best out of our politicians, and that's the only way we're going to get the changes we want to see changed, is not by fighting for those changes individually, but for fighting for a system that will ensure those changes no matter what.
Yeah.
Simply because they are in the benefit of the people, and they will benefit the American people as a whole.
I agree.
Yeah. So we've talked for a while now. I got one last topic that I want to bring up, that and it's related to the Catholic Church. And we touched on the Catholic Church a little bit, talking about wine and weed and all that good stuff. but this was a topic that it was a headline that I saw that interests me particularly, and it's basically that the Vatican has announced that not only are they divesting, but that they encourage all Catholics to divest from arms companies and fossil fuel companies. And the Catholic Church has not officially invested in these industries for a long period of time. At this point, the Catholic Church, the Vatican Bank and local dioceses have for a long period of time not invested their funds into fossil fuel companies and arms companies. But this change, what we're seeing now, is that the Vatican is telling all Catholics, not just the Catholic Church itself, to divest from these industries, which it deems to be immoral industries, and that by investing your money in that, you are aiding sin on our planet. Now, those weren't quotes, and I'm sure the Pope said it in a much more eloquent Catholic way, quoting some scripture, but I want to hear your take on that. First specifically about that specific action, and then more broadly about divesting from fossil fuels as a technique for reducing carbon emissions.
So each pope usually has something that they want to get done. John Paul II, what he wanted to get done was the reuniting Europe and knocking down the Soviet Union, because he was a Pole, and it's very close to him, Russia, John Paul II's, what he wanted to get done was to stop communism. And before that, you had Leo the 13th, Pope Leo the 13th, who wanted to see changes in the Industrial Revolution that were hurting the people. And so he wrote Rerum Novarum. And Pope Francis has decided that what he wants to push in his as Pope is climate change. He wants to make sure that the Earth has a long-term future. right, if you will. So him saying that ExxonMobil, for instance, if you buy gasoline at the gas station, not necessarily that it's a sin, but that it is promoting sin.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to say that climate change is a sin against the earth, right? Then you, by promoting it, are allowing for evil to continue in the world.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I'm getting from it.
Well, it's more specifically investment. So it's not about buying gas from ExxonMobil or buying guns from Smith & Wesson. It's about that you shouldn't invest your money into these companies because you're providing them a platform to do these evil things in the perspective of the Catholic Church. So it's not that, you got to stop pumping gas into your car and you got to, get a Tesla. It's more that if you're an investor and if you're choosing where to put your $100,000, don't put it into ExxonMobil because that's something a bad Catholic would do. And
Sure,
a good Catholic would put it into something, a more moral business, right? Whole Foods or something like that, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah,
again,
what do you think about that?
This is just my initial impression.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done any research into this, but again, Pope Francis has taken it upon himself to while he is Pope, to try and say that climate change is bad and that it should be and that it should be not a sin, but it should be promoted by Catholics, which I agree. But again, I don't have a super well-formed opinion on this, but the Pope is only infallibly speaking when he's speaking from the chair of Peter, which is, and this is a bunch of Catholic dogma stuff, but it isn't infallibly defined, right? When something is infallibly defined, it means that it is now a sin to do it or is now a teaching of the Catholic Church. So it's really confusing. I don't really understand all of it. But
yeah,
but it's not infallibly defined. And so it isn't a sin. It isn't a sin to invest your money in ExxonMobil unless it was infallibly defined.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was infallibly defined, but it was definitely the Vatican that said it. Like
yeah,
it came out like the Catholic Church. Like this is, they got their little seal on the top of the paper and the watermark and everything.
They got a .va at the.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not exactly sure if it was infallibly defined, but I do think that it seems like it is the Catholic Church speaking. So I'm not sure about the nuance of exactly what
makes it from God.
Yeah, exactly. What degree of authority they're speaking from.
Sure.
But it definitely seems like the Catholic Church is pushing in that direction and choosing to, encourage Catholics all across the world to follow their lead. What do you think about that?
Again, I don't really have a well-formed opinion on this. This is the first time I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
But it does.
I mean, how about this? Let me make it a little more personal. Are you invested in fossil fuels at all? And if so, would you divest because of this announcement from the Pope?
No, I'm not invested in.
Now, let's say you were. Let's say you had, a couple $100 of ExxonMobil. Yeah.
Would I sell my shares?
Let's say you make a good bit of money. Like you wouldn't make a bunch of money, but you would come out on top right now if you sold them.
It's a weird hypothetical. I don't know what I would do. I probably would sell my shares.
Yeah,
I probably would sell my shares.
Yeah.
Look.
I mean,
the Pope is the authority of the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So when he speaks, the Catholic Church and its members need to listen because he's the Pope. Whenever there's a papal decree, right? He's says. What does he say? He says, "I, Bishop of Rome, and." Not seed of humanity, although that's what John Paul II said, but servant of God. Whenever
he's got a lot of titles. I'm guessing.
Got a ton of titles.
Yeah.
But anyways, when he speaks, the Catholic Church listens. When he writes a letter or a decree on Sunday, the priest is obligated to read the letter, and we have to listen and take the word of the Pope. Again, he is the authority of the Catholic Church on earth, and so if he told me to sell my shares of ExxonMobil, I should do it. Yeah.
But let's look at it a little bit more broadly, not necessarily from a Catholic perspective, but just as moral beings who believe in goodness. Do you think that it is immoral and it is maybe even sinning to invest in a company that does? Can we agree objectively bad things? Like we'll put the arms companies aside for a second because that was included. Let's just talk about ExxonMobil and Royal Dutch Shell, all those guys. Can we first agree that as a premise, they do bad stuff, and that their operation and their profits are rooted in bad stuff, sin, even that destroying the planet for the profit of a few stockholders and putting people's lives in danger and causing direct suffering is a bad thing.
Yeah, that's a good premise.
Nice. All right, glad we can agree on that. And that by aiding in that process, that by sacrificing and putting your money aside in order to benefit that process of greed and sin and evilness, you are implicit in that crime, and that even though you're not actually drilling wells in Nigeria, and that you're not actually driving tanks all over the place and shipping oil, you are in fact a part of that machine that produces negative results in the world. Do you think that that's a good position to take, and it's logical to say that because this company does bad things and that you're aiding the company in doing those bad things, that you're actually doing a bad thing by aiding that company?
Yeah, well, you are, according to Rerum Novarum of Pope Leo XIII. You are, right? We covered a little bit of Rerum Novarum, which is basically just Catholic social teaching. But yes, to answer that question, I do believe it is immoral to... I mean, let's not just take ExxonMobil, but let's say there was a prostitution ring, right? And prostitution is, of course, condemned by the Catholic Church. You shouldn't have premarital sex. You shouldn't have sex outside of marriage. So, yeah, by saying, okay, I'm gonna provide capital so that this pimp can get more hookers, right? That's obviously wrong. But now, is it? And the Pope has said that, of course, climate change is a big issue and it's destroying the earth, and evidence shows that it is a big problem. By supporting ExxonMobil, you are hurting the earth, and you could equate that to maybe a prostitution ring, right? Because both are bad. Then yes,
or an illegal mining company, or an illegal logging company.
Sure, that would also be bad.
Yeah,
yeah. I don't know.
You think it's bad, huh?
Yeah, it's bad, and you probably shouldn't support it.
Yeah,
and again, like there's in the Catholic Church, there's a structure of obedience. Right? The bishops, the priests, there's a hierarchy, right? The priests have to answer to the bishops have to answer to archbishops to cardinal to papal nuncio, papal nuncio to the pope, right? That's the structure of the Catholic Church. And at the very bottom, there's the clergy, right? And whatever the pope says...
The laity.
Yeah. Did I say clergy?
Yeah.
The laity.
Everything else is the clergy.
That's right. Everything else is clergy, yeah. The laity, your Sunday goers... they should listen to their popes, right? Simple as that. They should listen to the Pope.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that obedience aspect to it. So even if I don't believe it, if I don't believe climate change is a big issue, even if I didn't believe it, which I do, I should still follow the Pope's teachings.
Yeah, regardless.
Regardless.
Yeah. Well, so as we talked about the moral implications and the Catholic perspective on that, right? So now let's look at it from sort of a strategic perspective. That do you think that divestment as a strategy is a viable and effective strategy for combating climate change? Because it's picked up a good amount of steam recently, and both my parents work in the renewable energy industry, and so we hear a lot of talk about all these new financial firms that are going into green investing. And I actually recently in my environmental economics class, we had a guest speaker come in on our Zoom call, and he was a founding member of a green investment firm that invests exclusively into renewable energy and sustainable projects. And this it's become quite a fad in the financial community is clean, sustainable, moral investing even.
Yeah, well,
right?
It's certainly the future.
Yeah, and a lot of big hedge funds on Wall Street are choosing to take this approach of divesting from quote unquote immoral companies in order to be able to uphold the brand of we're good investors, and you can feel happy about leaving your money with us because it's going to do good things. So in many ways, it seems like it does seem like an effective strategy, because it directly takes money out of the pockets of those who do harm to the world and instead give money to people who are building projects that would alleviate that sort of harm.
Yeah, that's fundamentally a good thing.
It's fundamentally a good thing, but I mean, I think that generally it is a very liberal strategy for combating climate change. That if we just sit back and let the market work itself out, everything will be fine. Eventually, it'll be cheaper to do renewable energy. So I think that in terms of a complete strategy for combating climate change, it's not nearly enough, in my opinion. I think that does it benefit climate change? Does it help combat it? Absolutely, and it should be promoted. Continued and promoted. But I do think that direct action by mostly young people, the younger generation, is going to be required, and we are going to need to see a lot more people speak up and make their voices heard, so that those in power are forced to deal with this issue right now, so that our grandchildren aren't living in a hellscape. Yeah.
I mean, if it's as serious as people make it out to be, then it should be the primary concern of the world.
But and yeah, it's an issue that will affect everybody. There's not an island, there's not a nation, there's not a city that won't be affected by climate change. Even if you live in an isolated Midwestern town, guess what? You're going to get affected by droughts, and you're going to get affected by food shortages. Even if your town itself is not affected and you have nice weather all year long, guess what? We live in a global world with a global supply chain. And when one part of the world gets destroyed ecologically, it has global impact.
Sure.
And by sitting by and taking the perspective that we're going to hole ourselves up in a castle, and that we're going to be fine because we're going to build our walls real high, and we'll have sea dams that'll keep the water out, and we'll make sure we'll just keep watering our lawns because we have water, screw the rest of them. That sort of perspective, I think, is going to, if it prevails and remains pervasive, we're going to see serious damage caused to our planet and to the human race as a whole, and nobody's future is going to remain safe and protected if we continue down the path that we are going on. And when people take that perspective that I'm going to be okay, I live in a nice house, I'll just buy a house up the hill when the flood comes in. Taking that perspective hurts not only yourself, but everybody else in the world that will be negatively affected by this issue, especially younger generations. I mean, if you have any sort of inkling of responsibility for future generations, if you have children or not, then you have an innate responsibility to combat climate change. Because if you're 60 years old, guess what? The problem is not falling on your shoulders. It's falling on your children's shoulders and your grandchildren's shoulders. And if you want to make sure that they are able to live a happy, healthy, fruitful life, then you need to put in time and energy in not only reducing your own carbon footprint, but reducing everybody's carbon footprint. Doing your part in ensuring that people will be able to live on our planet in the future.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this extensively on many podcasts.
Yeah, do your damn part, people. I mean, and obviously we're all hypocrites. We're all hypocrites. We all use plastic. We all pollute. But take real steps and make real sacrifices to live up to your moral responsibility.
I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
Wrap it up right there, yeah.
All right. Well, this has been the Outlet Podcast. This has been a great discussion, Eric. I think
great stuff, yeah.
I think we hit a lot.
We hit a lot of good stuff. It had a good flow to it. If you guys have listened up until now, please like and subscribe. Hit us with a comment. Let us know what you think.
Absolutely. And we should have timestamps down in the comments
section.
Yeah,
we'll do it this time. Yeah.
Sorry about last episode.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
We're going to have timestamps, so if we get boring at any part.
You skip to although
this is
you're at the end, so we should have said that at the beginning, huh?
Yeah.
But it is.
Whatever.
Yeah.
All right. And again, if you made it up to this point, we love you.
We love you. Appreciate you.
All right, guys. Peace.